science presupposes two things: the laws of logic and uniformity in nature. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you justify the presupposition of the laws of logic if you want to do science?
I don't know.
Okay, how do you justify the presupposition that nature is uniform? Because these are base axioms if you want to do science, right?
Because we observe it to be uniform. We haven't seen any deviations in fundamental constants so far.
But it's an axiom tree that's true until it isn't, right? So how do you justify that it's true? Like, what was the thing that was done to establish this axiom?
Again, we observe laws of physics and we've never seen them vary over time or over space.
Awesome. So it's true because there's no evidence to show contrary, right? There's no evidence to prove the inverse.
Yes.
Awesome. So why do you think that is? Why do you think that it is true? And why do you think that there is no evidence to prove the inverse?
Because, again, nobody has ever presented that evidence yet. And I think that it is like reasonable to consider something true unless there is an evidence against it, if there is already many pieces of evidence that are for it.
Okay, so if there was evidence that might show that the contrary is true, in other words, that there is no uniformity in nature, you would then use the laws of logic, which you also presuppose to be true, right? So why do you presuppose the laws of logic are true?
I think they are just like concepts that we made in order to explain how reality works.
It's self-evident, right? Because we can't even apply this logic that you're applying for your presuppositionalist argument without employing logic of itself, right? It's self-evident and indispensable.
Yeah, but do you think it's something that was discovered? Do you think it's something that was like put here for us?
It's discovered in the same way that mathematical things are discovered.
Yeah, I think it was invented in order to describe real behaviors of how the world works.
Yeah, it's like a descriptive abstraction, the same thing as math.
Yeah.
When was it invented? What year was it invented?
Yeah, it's like, for example, the month January. Like the month January, it was defined using a certain position of how high the sun is in the sky at a certain point in time. And technically, that the sun was making that behavior before humans existed. But the concept of January, as defined by that, was invented by humans based on that.
So the actual laws of logic predated humans, but the discovering of them and the like titling them and labeling them, humans did that?
No, they're just necessary truths about reality that are self-evident and inescapable, right?
Then they weren't invented.
And the word invented was used.
No, I wouldn't go as far.
I wouldn't call them
they...
invented. I would simply say that they're discovered in the same way that mathematics is discovered, right? The fact that 2 + 2 = 4.
So they predated humans?
So it's pre-existent.
I would say they are invented.
Fundamental to the rules of reality.
Like you guys, that's the beef.
Yeah,
so it's as old as reality.
Because they were not described before humans existed.
Okay, you're conflating the description and the invention.
Yes, because laws of logic, like the objects where there is a difference between description and invention are objects that actually materially exist, like the sun, for example. But the laws of logic, they aren't physical, they aren't material. So
the implication being that nothing exists except for that which is material?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
What about thoughts? Do thoughts exist?
Yes, they are a result of like electrical currents in the neurons in the brain.
I guess what's your definition of physical then? Can you define physical for us?
Space-time.
So it occupies space?
And time.
Okay, how does one measure a thought?
How does one measure a thought?
Yeah, it occupies space.
Yeah, I guess you could like connect a brain to some kind of device that would be mapping the brain activity when someone is thinking about something.
Do you think
we're trying to measure
thoughts...
the thought, not the brain?
Yeah, that'd be measuring like the brain processes. But do you think that some thoughts weigh more than other thoughts?
What do you mean by that? Like, do you mean weight as the force of gravity or the weight?
Do they occupy more space? Are they more dense? They have physical properties? Like, what are the physical properties? You said that occupies space.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the processes that happen in neurons, they have weight. I don't know if they are just pure energy, or do they actually have some kind of mass?
Pure energy as opposed to diluted energy.
I mean, energy can be in a form of matter, but that's just one of the forms of energy. There could be also energy which doesn't have mass.
Well, it's either energy or matter.
Matter is a form of energy, according to E equals mc squared.
Okay, so what's pure energy?
I didn't use it in a scientific sense. I just meant energy that isn't matter, but that isn't a strictly defined scientific word.
You know, the issue that you have is that you can't claim that the laws of logic are pre-existent and then turn around and claim that they are merely dependent upon description of men because nothing exists outside the material. These are contradictory claims. The laws of logic cannot be pre-existent and nothing exists outside of material. Those can't both be true.
What claim did I make that would require laws of logic to be pre-existent?
I thought we already got there. We haven't got there yet.
Uniformity in nature, bro.
Like, do you realize that the very process of you asking that question required logic?
How?
Okay. Do you know the three?
So, hold on. So does the assumption that only a god can explain it.
Well, jumping ahead. So we're just dealing with the logic. Do you know the three base principles of logic?
Yeah, the law of identity, of non-contradiction, and of excluded middle.
Right. So language itself is logical. Every sentence follows a structure of identity. Like, this word refers to this meaning, and non-contradiction because that word cannot mean the exact opposite at the same time, and excluded middle, like either a sentence is coherent or incoherent. So language itself is logic.
Okay, but again, language is a human invention, and logic, which is describing that something. Let's take this law that something cannot be true and false at the same time. The concept of something being true and the concept of something being false is also a human invention. So
did you know that for you to make the argument it's a human invention required logic?
How?
You just made a logical argument.
I made an argument that you could describe as logical because
it was actually illogical, but you attempted to use logic.
Because humans made up the concept of being logical or illogical.
What about a dog? Are you guys familiar with Pavlovian dogs? They salivate because they think they're going to get food when the bell is rung. They say, if bell is rung, then I'm going to get food. Even dogs use logic.
You can't even think without logic, is the point.
Okay, so what is your point in that?
It's pre-existent.
Okay, so let's just take this assumption that logic is pre-existent, and what do you want to imply by that?
It's not an assumption. It's a logical fact.
It's necessary.
Well, it's a priority.
I got a question. When you say someone's illogical, are they using logic at that point?
Yes, like everything uses logic. You just may not properly use it.
I thought illogical was the opposite of logic.
It's not. It's an improper use of logic. For example, like I said earlier, to even make a statement that's coherent, right, is using logic.
Yeah, but that's to be coherent. Logical, it usually can be incoherent, and you throw out the rules of logic.
Oh no, that's only one portion of the three principles. The coherency is just one portion of it.
Hang on, determining that it's incoherent is also using logic. You're not throwing them out. If you make the determination that's incoherent, you would also be incoherent by what standard, right? It's by the standard of logic.
Yeah, you're talking about the analyzation of the prior sentence, not the prior sentence itself, right? The person analyzing if it was incoherent, that's using logic, but the guy who was illogical was not using logic.
Okay, I was answering it. So that's just the excluded middle. To even formulate a incoherent statement requires the use of words, which uses the law of identity and non-contradiction.
Not if someone's illogical, right?
We're not disagreeing the
words.
No. Even if they're illogical and incoherent, they have to use a word, and that word has an identity and cannot simultaneously mean the opposite of that word.
To that person, it can though, because they're being illogical. They're not using the same definition as you.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter what definition they're using. It can't simultaneously have opposite definitions.
Literally.
Why are you
For-
guys
for someone
arguing
being-
against logic? I don't get it. That's
I'm not
illogical.
arguing against it, but look up. I mean, if you look into being illogical, that's just what it means. You're throwing out logic.
No, don't save him. Let's go back to you were just wrong, so you need to acknowledge the point we were at, which is a use of a word itself is the use of logic because the word cannot simultaneously mean the opposite of that word.
I would disagree.
You would disagree.
Yeah, if someone's being illogical, right? They can tell me in their mind when they're speaking, the words can be whatever they want them to mean.
Even in their illogical, incoherent mind, a word can't simultaneously be the opposite of that word.
I don't see it. Why not?
Maybe give an example, Ancho. Since
Any word in
There's a
existence,
possibility.
like any word in existence, like hot can't simultaneously mean cold.
This statement is false.
I hear you, but for someone being illogical, I disagree.
Give an example of someone that can use a word without using the law of identity.
Well, for example, if I wanted to be illogical, right, I could take your words and make them mean whatever I want them to mean, right? And just throw out all logic and not understand you at all while simultaneously saying I understand you.
To even say "I understand you" is a coherent sentence using logic for starters. But no,
You who's being logical about it.
Even if you want to redefine the words, you're still defining them, thus identifying them.
No, you're defining them because you're the one being logical in the conversation, right? The guy being illogical wouldn't be.
You literally just said he could define them however he wanted to.
Yeah, so he can give them dual meaning if he wanted to.
He can't actually use them that way, though. They can't be used if that's the case. They literally can't be used, literally.
Yeah, I get what you're saying because obviously we're trying to be logical, but I disagree as a principle.
No, it's just a fact, though, that language itself is the use of logic, and it's because it uses words, which uses the law of identity and non-contradiction. So just the word has an identity. It means that thing. It can't simultaneously mean the opposite of that thing. And to even formulate a coherent sentence uses the law of the excluded middle, which means something is or isn't. It's not in the middle. The door isn't open and closed. So
Does logic need a mind to exist for it to be any bit meaningful?
No, I don't think so.
Logic is
So
pre-existent.
logic can exist without a mind.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, maybe not. Maybe not an ultimate mind. You're talking about a super deep question there, but I just want.
It's meaningless. Without a
want the
mind, it's meaningless.
Well, that's a deep question. Like an ultimate mind, maybe.
I think those are just silly philosophical debates, right? Because ultimately, it's just a framework that rational minds use to explain reality, right? To make reality decipherable.
No, that's our whole point. It isn't just a framework that was invented by man. It is pre-existent.
No, it's a framework that's built into all the fundamental characteristics of our reality. Is that logic exists and that the world is decipherable, right? Because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be able to do anything useful.
Okay, so it was built in.
that,
So it was built in, right? Like you said, it was built in.
And even people like Austin was saying and others, even when someone is making a completely incoherent and illogical statement, they're still using logic to formulate what words they're saying, right? Even though they have a completely different understanding, they're still using logic to communicate.
Presuppositionalists will use logic to say that their logic requires a god.
Yeah, Jake, like the law of identity requires you to reference something, you're referencing something with that word. Could you say, Jake, that the laws of logic are made of material, like apple, opposed to the law of logic, it being just an apple?
No, it's not. It's not something material in that sense.
Okay, so it's immaterial.
It's like a characteristic of the structure of our reality.
Structure is doing some heavy lifting, right there.
I mean,
it's either material or not. I mean,
like I've said before, this stuff is getting over my head. I only have a 70 IQ, so I struggle with these concepts myself.
I doubt that you have 70 IQ. That's like legally retarded, bro.
No, I've been diagnosed multiple times my whole life.
So I think you guys get the point, though, right? It's like there's a metaphysical pre-existent quality to the like prerequisite to any discussion.
Can I ask something? Because most of the people don't do this argument just for the sake of discussing. They want to make a point. I don't know if this is what you're going
Well,
to do.
the point is just the presupper thing that
that
you can't have logic and you can't have uniformity of nature without a God.
without God, without
When
God,
did anyone make that
It's just a
argument?
circular object.
This is like a
Argument.
pre-2quoque straw man. That was super weird. No, I was asking you guys because Embo wanted to talk about science, and then I asked him if he agrees that science presupposes the laws of logic and uniformity in nature. And I was asking how he accounts for those presuppositions. I didn't say anything about God.
He's trying to make sure he even had a justified position to further discussion.
Yeah, because I genuinely have a question to the people who make this argument, and I wasn't sure if you're one of those people that I can ask this question to.
You can ask any question.
So do you want me to ask it?
Sure.
Okay. So those people make an argument that in order to ground the laws of logic, you need something that is ultimate to them. You need like an ultimate mind, but then you don't have to justify that even further because like that's already the ultimate being. But I have a question. If you have to reach a point where you have a presupposition that it doesn't have a further justification, why can't you just stop at the level of laws of logic existing and the nature being uniform? Why can't I have just that as my basic presupposition without it being further justified? And why would that be worse than you going one step further and doing that with a God?
It's presupposed because it's an axiom of the system.
Well, you would just need to justify the statement at that point. Like you'd have to further justify, because now your position is that there's pre-existent laws of logic. So justify how that's possible.
It's just a brute force aspect of our reality, and invoking a God doesn't justify it any more than invoking Coca-Cola or toast being the source of that.
Yeah, but
Really?
now you've gone to dogmatism. So you say it just is, which is merely reasserting a precept. That's dogmatism. And then you're trying to pass the buck by saying other people are merely asserting God. When no one else made any other arguments, you're the one who's making the dogmatic argument when you say it just is, though.
Yeah, you're projecting dogmatism as you use it.
Well, is God the only possible explanation for the existence of logic and the uniformity?
Yes.
I think I'm doing a critique of
Well,
how you account for them.
I asked the question. Can I have someone answer the question?
I'm answering the question. I don't have to answer it in a way that pleases you. I'm doing a critique on how you account for the laws of logic. I'm doing a critique on that. So if you're going to then ask, how does one justify it other than God? So if I ask you how you account for the laws of logic, and then you ask a question, and then you start saying, oh, you didn't answer my question. Well, my question was first.
Like he's critiquing your use of logic and the acknowledgement of it. And you're just trying to say, I think I know what yours is, and I don't like it. Okay, cool, man. Can you just justify yours?
I just feel like we all agree that the laws of logic exist and that they're fundamental to our reality, and that we use them in order to make cohesive arguments. But the only difference is that you guys are saying that, well, for those to exist, you have to invoke a creator to justify their existence.
You said it's no different than a bottle of Coke.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is basically, I could say that anything that I can choose is necessary to justify it, as long as it's something that somehow is the source of that logic, right?
Yeah, it would just be something that's necessary, not something that's contingent, like a bottle of Coke.
Well,
And you're using the logic itself.
Explain how a material bottle of Coke is necessary for the pre-existence of the laws of logic.
Explain how a God is necessary for the pre-existence of the laws of logic.
Deflection, bro.
It's literally the same question.
It's a deflection, though, right? Like it's you're trying to not justify. See, this is what you can't. Let me ask you this question back. Do you agree that a God could account for it? Yes or no?
Could a God? Sure, a God could account for it, but so could many other things account for it.
Okay, justify the claim that many other things can.
Could an alien civilization that created a simulation of our reality invoke the laws of logic within the simulation?
They could invoke the pre-existent laws of logic, but that doesn't justify their existence.
Is it possible that within their realm that the laws of logic are different?
Is it possible? Baseless appeal to possibility. Still, the answer is no, because the laws of logic are pre-existent
within our reality, but maybe in the alien civil, or maybe some other realm that is tunneling into our realm. They don't have the same laws of logic. They have other laws of operation that still allows them to do useful things, like create simulations that have laws of logic. To create
simulations, they would have to apply our laws of logic.
No, they would just create rules within our reality that uses our particular laws of logic, but maybe they operate within a realm that has different laws of logic.
For them to even operate in a way that they can create rules for us requires the use of the laws of logic, which we just acknowledged is pre-existent and independent of our descriptive tools. So it's also pre-existent for the aliens.
I think,
Jake, I think you said reality itself is contingent upon the laws of logic. Didn't you say that?
No, I've said that in order for us to be able to do, in order for our reality to be comprehensible, it requires the laws of logic to be an intrinsic property of our reality, as well as
You're
the
invoking
uniformity
an
of nature.
entire.
As well as the uniformity of nature. It's just
So you're invoking like alternate realities.
no. I'm not invoking alternate realities. I'm just saying that the God isn't the only possible explanation for the existence of a comprehensible reality.
You just said our reality. You just always keep like defaulting back to that. It's pretty bad look. But you said our reality is contingent upon the laws of logic. So implicit in your previous claim that the aliens can exist without it is that you're invoking an alternate reality.
Yeah, I'm just saying, what are other possible creators of our reality, right? There could be beings.
Doesn't
There
matter.
could be beings. There could be non-God beings that live on another, in another realm that can generate realities like ours that have certain rules.
Is that other realm an
And
alternate
maybe they're
reality?
not, and maybe they're not bound by the same rules that we're bound by.
Can you justify that?
What do you mean? Can I justify that?
Justify the existence of alternate realities that don't include the pre-existence of the laws of logic.
In the same way as how can you justify the creation of or the existence of God?
I will just point out
It's just an enigma.
very
What I'm
obvious.
saying
It's
is,
very obvious that you are really obsessed with the God component of the conversation, and that's because you know that it's really the thing needed to satisfy it, and that you're kind of projecting onto me. But even funnier than that is prior to that acknowledgement, you'll go as far as to invoking alien civilizations and alternate realities that don't adhere to the laws of logic.
right,
You would appeal to
basically,
that
I'm saying, yeah.
possibility without justifying it prior to accepting the inevitability of an intelligent agent.
Well, God is just
See
as
the
much as an
problem?
enigma. God is just as much as an enigma as a super intelligent civilization that exists on another realm that operates possibly under different rules of reality. That's just as big, or maybe slightly less big than the enigma of God, right? Because the whole idea, the whole concept of God in itself is an enigma, right? Because it's a being it's an ever existent being that's beyond time and space, right? That in and of itself is an enigma because as temporal beings, it's kind of impossible for us to even justify that there's something that exists beyond time and space, right?
Well, this is
No,
where the
because we have
naturalist wants.
creation here. We have the creation here, whereas you're suggesting another alien place or planet, and maybe
No,
if
I'm
you
not
don't have
saying an alien
evidence of
place.
that,
I'm just saying another
right?
realm. I'm not even saying it's another place. It could be another realm that's also just like God is beyond time and space, right?
But then you
So
don't have
you're,
the evidence of that unless you can present it to us. Whereas we
And
actually have
we
creation.
don't have we don't have evidence of the God either.
We do. We
that's
have
not
his
true.
creation.
Yeah, that's
You
not
can
But
have.
true.
that could also be the evidence of the creation of this other of these other beings that are from another realm who operate under different rules beyond time and space.
So, but we're still going back to an actual creator, right? A creator.
Sure, but I would be different than the creator because maybe those beings were the subject of a creation from something else that also
Okay.
operates beyond time and space.
So
There could be an infinite.
you're going to get into
There
infinite
could be an
regress.
infinite regression, right?
Oh, there's no could be.
There's
There
nothing
is one.
exclusive. There's nothing exclusive about the idea that there could be an infinite regression of creators. Just that's any more absurd than an infinite God that's existed beyond time and space for infinity, right?
No, that solves the problem of infinite regression
Well, why is infinite regression any more of a problem than an infinite God that exists beyond time and space?
because it's outside of time, thus regression.
Well, no, you don't need time to prevent a regression.
You literally do need space and time for regression.
No.
Yes.
What if all the creators in the series are instantaneously created?
What does that have to do with the infinite regression as to like the primary mover? You just
I
invoked a
mean, like I
creation
said,
again.
you guys are just invoking
Creation.
another enigma. And my
You
enigma is
invoked
no different than your
creation,
enigma.
brother. You invoked creation. So whether or not the creation itself was instant, something still was pre-existent. And really, the very obvious part here, this is what in the typical secularists or humanists, we know they all avoid this, is that there is a requirement for a pre-existence of the laws of logic. And so anyone that's being good faith then immediately would ask, wait a minute, if that were true, what organized said laws? What's the lawmaker? Because we know that that's an antecedent, right?
What if there's some naturalistic process that creates an infinite number of realities, and some of them have the laws of logic and some of them don't, and only the ones that have the laws of logic create beings that can logically function the way that we do, right? In the universes where there are no laws of logic and that everything is incomprehensible, then you never develop thinking minds, right?
You invoked nature, so you've now skipped past the requirement of the pre-existence of the laws of logic, which are not bound by nature. Although I want to point this out to my other people in the room here that I was talking to earlier. This is why I hit them with the first and second law. But anyway, because you notice that like it's like, oh, you just believe in God, you presuppose you're Sky Daddy. But it's like on the other side, you can just say, what if ancient civilizations and alternate realities and infinite universes and nature that makes nature that's not nature and isn't bound by nature but is like nature but it isn't nature? But it's like you can say what if anything as long as it's not God, anything but God. But that's
just saying that God is just not the only exclusive explanation, and I don't think that God is a particularly useful explanation, right?
Or you've yet to present a coherent alternative.
Because the fundamental characteristics of God are just as mysterious and enigmatic as whatever I'm describing, right?
That first of all, that's a subjective opinion which I strongly disagree with because you haven't even offered yours coherently yet. I mean, you agree that you can offer. You do agree that God does satisfy the requirement, right? We discussed that earlier. You do agree with that.
Which God?
Any
God? Any God?
An ultimate being, an ultimate supreme being.
What if there's multiple gods and they all build their own worlds? Could that be possible?
You see, you can't even answer in good faith.
Well, you're not going to answer that question. You're not going to answer that question, right?
No, it's not that
you understand that there's nothing wrong with the idea that there could be many gods.
You're spiraling, bro. You're spiraling. So it's not that I can't or won't answer your question. It's that you are repeatedly deflecting away by trying to get gotchas on me. You failed at every attempted gotcha. But at one point, at one point, I have to put my foot down, right, in the conversation and say, okay, I'm going to stop answering your deflections. And my question was very simple. You should have just answered in good faith, right? You do agree, though, that an ultimate supreme being does satisfy the need to explain the pre-existent laws of logic. Like, it does answer the question.
It's one possible explanation.
Okay, so we can check that off the list, right? Regardless of the interpretation, the specificity, all of that, like an ultimate supreme being or intelligent agent does actually fix the problem. Okay, you're saying there could be other explanations.
That's right.
Okay, justify them.
And you haven't. Could multiple gods explain the laws of logic?
Sure, like, but you can't have.
When you say explain, do you mean account for, like offer the preconditions that keep them, eternal, like you said they were?
No, simply for the fact that we live in a reality that has the laws of logic and is comprehensible, right?
You asked, can multiple gods explain the laws of logic?
Can multiple gods?
Of course, anybody. I could explain the laws of logic, Jake. Anybody could explain the laws of logic.
When I say explain, I mean, could they account for the laws of logic existing in our reality?
That's what I just asked you, and you said no, and then started saying some other nonsense.
Okay, maybe I misheard you. Remember, I only have a 70 IQ, so sometimes.
No, I just got you worked up. Just calm down. Just calm down a little bit. Let's just reset.
I'm not worked up.
Well, you're talking much faster, and you're not listening.
Well, I mean, it's hard.
All right, so if you're gonna pause it, if you're gonna propose multiple gods, either they share the same nature, but then you collapse them into one necessary being. They all have the same will, or they have. You've collapsed them into one necessary being. They all have the same will, or they have different natures and wills. Then you face the possibility of conflicting logic, and you have no reason to believe that there's conflicting logic, because there's not conflicting logic.
What if they're able to operate independently without, one god can't stop another god from creating their realities, right?
Well, then he just explained that inevitably runs the risk of a contradicting laws of logic. If one can't stop the other, then they can both do something contradictory.
So laws of logic have properties, right? They're universal. They're true everywhere. They're always true. They're invariant. They're immutable. What's up?
They're not true everywhere, though. They're not true everywhere. Like in quantum, quantum, they're not true. We have fuzzy logic. Like there's other type of logic that just the classical laws of logic just don't
at what point in time in quantum is the laws of logic not true?
Superposition.
Well, okay, what violation of logic is that?
It can exist in two places at the same time, or not at all, or neither.
What law of logic does it violate?
Non-contradiction, perhaps, but do we have evidence of the actual claims of quantum computing?
No.
Yeah,
superposition is a mathematical idea.
Saying fuzzy logic replaces classical logic is like saying probability replaces arithmetic.
No, that's not what I said. That's just straw man. That's just
It's not a straw man, retard. It's not a straw man. It's an analogy.
Retard. All right. I said
Well, you
fuzzy
gotta.
logic
Well, you
exists.
do notice that he was
said
trying
the
to
laws of logic apply to
Dude.
everything, and I said they don't apply
Okay.
to fuzzy logic.
Dude, my guy. He was trying to rebut you, and you
By
cut him
calling
off.
me a retard.
Now
and
you're
I'm
doing
supposed
it to
let
me.
him keep talking.
You see what's happening? No, you didn't interrupt him, but after he called you a retard, he called you a retard after you interrupted him for the second straight time. So you're just getting worked up, bro. Like, he's trying to explain to you the analogy. You can think he's wrong, maybe he's wrong, whatever, but you didn't even let him say it. So he's trying to explain the analogy. I don't even know what it is because I didn't get to hear it.
Well, it's a straw man.
How is it a straw man if he's trying to present the analogy? You don't even know what it is. How can you claim it's a straw man?
Yeah, you said I'm trying to apply the fuzzy logic to logic, or
That's not what. Okay.
He said fuzzy logic doesn't replace the laws of logic, which he didn't say that. He just said there's certain scenarios where the laws of logic just, they're not suitable to explain it. You have to use a different framework.
That would be a
Like
replacement.
fuzzy logic, those places where fuzzy logic would replace classical logic. Is that what you're talking about? This is ridiculous. You guys are being ridiculous. So let me finish what I was saying. Thanks. Fuzzy logic replaces classical logic is like saying probability replaces arithmetic.
No, it's not replacing it.
Dude, I'm gonna start muting people if you just keep interrupting. Like we just covered. Yeah, if you're saying that in some places, listen, dude, moderation, okay? If someone's saying that in some places it actually doesn't apply because fuzzy logic applies, that's a replacement. Okay, now just let him say what he's saying and then disagree with him.
But it's not addressing the point, Witsit.
I don't. How do you know when you keep not letting him say it?
When you say they apply everywhere, universally, and they say, "Oh, but not here."
It's so weird that you won't let him say. Like, if you were so confident that you were going to be able to refute him, then just let him say it. Do you know how much I sit here and let people say things I think sound insanely stupid? It's because I know I'm going to be able to refute it. So the inclination to interrupt and not let it be heard seems to signify the opposite. So just let him say his point, and then your turn, and you can rebut his point.
Yeah, it's not a rival to laws of logic. It's an application of them. But I'll simplify it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a replacement.
You spent 5 minutes saying you weren't saying it was a replacement, and now you're saying it is a replacement.
Well, that's what you're saying. It doesn't apply to him. So it's like, okay, then it's a replacement.
You spent 5 minutes interrupting me to say, I'm not saying it doesn't address my point. You're saying it does.
Yeah, you're repeating yourself, but it doesn't address my point because you said they apply to everything. And I just gave you an example that they don't apply.
That's all dishonest
acts, you told me how they replaced. You explained, oh, well, the laws of logic are replaced with fuzzy logic in situations like that. So I guess they don't apply to everything.
Well, no, wouldn't it be safer to say pure that all other?
Fuzzy logic is not a rival to the laws of logic, but an application of them.
Yeah, right. Even other forms of logic are still using logic. Sometimes these forms are just used for sorting information, but it's still
your analogy, Galley, that it would be like saying probability is a replacement for arithmetic was spot on. That's what fuzzy logic is.
Fuzzy logic replaces classical logic is like saying probability replaces arithmetic. Probability theory still presupposes arithmetic.
Correct.
Okay, so like I put in the text chat, when someone says you're being illogical, to me means you're throwing logic out. So if you guys are saying that's not the definition, what I'm coming to the conclusion is you're saying no matter what I say, I'm being logical, I'm just misusing it.
No, well, it's just a dilemma. It's just a false dilemma, meaning that your conclusion in and of itself can be void of logic, but to even try to present said conclusion requires the use of logic. It's just making the point that It's just making the point that people skip over the fact that it is a prerequisite to communicating ideas in general, regardless of the logical or illogical nature of those ideas.
That's where you lose me. Also,
to even communicate or convey.
Will correct your thinking.
Being illogical, in my mind, would be that he's not trying to communicate or convey anything in the sense that I would understand it, right? So of course it's not going to make sense. It's illogical.
That's not true. Someone can say something that you understand and you can still know that it's illogical, meaning that the sentence can be coherent. Right? Like I can say the door is open and closed at the same time. You understood the sentence I said, but the sentence I said makes no sense. No, with the logic.
No, because all those words in a logical person's mind can mean anything, any other definition, right?
But they're still putting them in a certain right? They're still putting them in an alignment, right? First word, second word, third word.
You're
for
assuming
what
that
they-
in your example, sure, but they can be speaking backwards. They can put words out of order.
but they're still using logic, right? By using first
No,
word,
they would
second
be
word, third word.
illogical at that point.
Even using a word, like no matter what, even if they misidentify the word, they're still identifying it. You understand that?
Yes.
Yeah, so back to my first statement. There's no way someone can be not using logic.
That's what I said.
How about speaking in
Okay.
tongues?
Yeah, I just don't
Like it from
I just
God.
don't agree with that.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's not an agree or disagree thing. So, like, if anyone uses a word, they're identifying that word to mean something. Even if they're wrong, they're still using the law of identity, even if they're misapplying it. And then to actually formulate it in a sentence, they are, if it's coherent at all, right? Whether or not the
What if
conclusion
it's
is right
not
or wrong,
coherent?
then okay, that's only one of the laws, the principles of logic.
So if he breaks all three, he's
It's
still
only going to be
using logic.
incoherent if they're not
You can't
referencing
break all
anything.
three because he
Like,
couldn't
if
even
I
use a
say blah
word.
blah blah, if I say blah blah blah, I'm not referencing anything. I mean, is that
There
your
you go.
example? Blah, like blah blah
There's no
blah.
There you
law.
go. There you
There's
go.
no
Someone
law
can say
of
blah blah
logic
blah.
that says you can't speak.
No. There you go. You can say blah blah blah. Because the actual point is that you can actually convey or communicate an idea without using the laws of logic.
False.
That's just
How
Do you
wrong.
have an
about
example? No,
speaking in
just wrong
tongues?
is dogmatism. Just say, like, make an argument.
No,
Yeah,
because
logic
you're,
is
what
not the
you're saying is
prerequisite. The presence is the prerequisite, not logic. Meaning is given before rules are drawn. And that's the simplicity of it. Hashtag fact.
because what it
Even if
seems
that
in
were
my
true,
mind.
Yeah,
that
nobody's
wouldn't
arguing.
change my point. So
Even if that was
Yeah,
true, meaning you
nobody's even
don't
arguing
know,
that.
meaning
People
you're
were actually
speaking of
arguing
a
that the
position
meaning.
of ignorance.
no, see, it wouldn't change my point.
Yes,
What I'm
because you're dogmatic.
interpreting
No, see, no.
from what you're saying is that the listener is using logic to interpret what the illogical person said.
No, I'm saying that for the illogical person to attempt to convey an idea at all requires the laws of logic.
Again, you're presupposing that they're trying to convey an idea, though.
Well, then that means you're not rebutting my point, are you?
What? No, the person's being illogical.
But my guy, try and listen really carefully. What is my claim?
Well,
Can you
your
tell me
claim was
mine?
that you can't even speak unless you're using logic.
I said the use
No.
of language and the use
Yeah,
of a
Can I ask
word.
you guys something?
So
Is
what
there
you
such a
devolved
thing
to was
as
people can
speech?
say, people can mumble, blah blah blah. That was your big home run argument. So my
That wasn't mine, but I
yeah,
get
that's
what
something you can say. That's something you can say. So my
Yeah.
argument is like super simple, right? Which is to convey an idea, right? Or to have a discussion, okay? To convey or discuss ideas requires the use of the laws of logic.
yeah. And my rebut to that was, if you're not trying to convey an idea or communicate, then what is that?
Then that's not a rebuttal to my point. If my point is,
Oh.
if my point is, in order to convey ideas, you use the laws of logic, and then you pretend you're rebutting my point by saying, well, what if someone isn't trying to convey an idea? It's a non sequitur.
I'm refuting the point that you said that somebody couldn't even
Anchovy, you're
speak
affirming.
unless
You're
they're using
affirming what he's
logic.
telling you.
No, I'm
You're
not. He
affirming
said
it because
someone
you're saying
cannot even.
well, let me tell you how you are affirming. You're affirming it because you're saying that people can make a meaningless statement if they're illogical. If they don't appeal to the laws of logic, they can make a meaningless statement. His assertion is, in order you have a meaningful conversation, you'd have to be referencing something that would follow the laws of logic, such as identity, non-contradiction,
No.
and so
I
forth.
never
And
said.
your argument is
You're
that you
making
can
the
have a
assumption it's
meaningless
meaningless.
conversation. Yeah,
No, you're making the assumption that illogical equates
no,
to
you're not saying
meaningless.
anything else. You have no
Wait,
argument.
let me actually like restate my actual initial point here, which was to even make a coherent statement using language requires the use of logic. I then gave specific explanation for it, right? That's what happened. So to even make a coherent statement, I then explained why that was the case. You did not rebut it at all, right?
Oh, okay. Well, no.
Do you remember what it
Originally, the
was? Well,
statement was
I
that
used
you
the
couldn't
three.
even speak
I used the
without
three
logic. That was
principles
the
of
statement.
I used the three principles of logic and explained how all three are used if you're going to state a coherent sentence. So do you
Okay.
remember
let me
what those
finally
were?
address you.
If you're gonna put it that way, I don't disagree. But those weren't the comments earlier.
It's
What was the
false as
comment?
well. It's
The
false as
comment was
well.
specifically that you couldn't even use words without logic.
Coherence
Correct.
is not a law, but a convention. Let me
Words are
refute
meaningful,
both.
Anchovy.
So, Witsit, you said two things now. First, you said in order to convey ideas, you're using the laws of logic. And secondly, you said to make a coherent statement, it requires the laws of logic. So let me teach you something, please. Conveying ideas is not dependent on logic, but on presence shared. For example, a scream and a song and a gesture or crying convey without syllogism. So saying that the laws of logic is necessary for this is just nonsense, because the laws of logic are later formalizations and not the ground of its meaning or of meaning itself. So to say that you're using logic is only to relabel the act of communication under their frame. The verdict is simple. Ideas are conveyed by presence and not by logic, and logic names after the fact, and it does not create the fact or the act itself.
Okay, I didn't say it created anything, nor did I say your initial straw man, right? Which is that coherence is a law. I didn't say that either, right? What I said was to actually coherently convey an idea, to state a coherent sentence or statement using language requires logic. And I explained how it does that. Because to use a word, you're using the law of identity, right? And then, for example, to adhere to make a sentence coherent, you're adhering to the excluded middle principle. And without applying these basic laws, you cannot even articulate a coherent statement.
I agree.
And that's how
Everybody
we
just agree.
right?
This is so silly. Everybody just agree. Like, what's the problem?
I
Well,
only brought
the goal-
I only brought this point up earlier just to make the point of like it's even more basic than that. I'd like the actual point. The reason this point was even made by me earlier was just to make the point that it's like really simple, and somehow it's like, no, we got to fight it. It's just a fact. You can't say a coherent sentence without applying logic. You have to identify words. That word can't mean the opposite of that word at the same time, and it can't have an excluded middle. It cannot like go against the excluded middle principle
Right.
and be coherent.
Okay, so
in my opinion,
coherence
you
is
guys
not
moved the
a-
goalpost. The
original
original
point was,
argument was
though,
that illogical
apply
is using
everywhere.
logic.
I thought it was they apply everywhere. Like for discussion,
Well, if
I
that was
agree.
the case, dude, quantum entanglement wouldn't even be a word, right? Or quantum superpositioning. So, I mean, the fact that we know what that is and it's illogical kind of like contradicts.
No. Do you agree?
Hey, what's up, love?
Okay. Do you agree that quantum entanglement has
How
an
are ya?
identity?
Need that real quick.
There's a direct refutation, and it's very easy. Coherence does not arise from laws, it arises from presence. Logic follows after naming what was already understood.
That isn't a refutation. So like
it is.
it's
You
not
just
the sentence.
don't seem
the
to
sent-
comprehend it now.
Okay, sounds good. So you cannot present a coherent
be it,
sentence.
love. You want
Address
some
it
popcorn?
specifically. How can you give me an example of articulating a coherent sentence without using the laws of logic? Go ahead, give me an example.
I mean, I could give an example. So my example would be speaking in tongues.
That's incoherent.
You speak in tongues. What?
That's not coherent.
Right. It's not coherent, and it gives you a revealed truth. You can get to a revealed truth.
Yeah, how do you
speaking
get to
in
the
tongues.
revealed truth through speaking tongues according to Scripture?
Well,
There
I
has
know
to be
like
someone there to interpret it and say it in that native language.
right, the interpreter, but that's only if you're doing it like in front of a church, because he's talking about prophecy is a better spiritual gift. Because to outsiders, when you're speaking in tongues, it's going to look crazy. So you need the interpreter there. But you can speak in tongues and talk to God directly.
Okay, but that's not okay. So the context of this conversation is that for humans, for men to even converse with each other, to talk about ideas, to even begin to try to make claims such as God doesn't exist, anything like that. That's the actual initial context. To even have the discussion, to even enter the debate, to even dispute any of this requires the use of the laws of logic. To even convey to you
Right, for
a coherent
discussion,
idea.
I agree for discussion, but not everywhere in the entire reality do they apply.
So what was your response to
These are
mine
just
when I brought up
tedious.
superposition?
No, I
and
agree with
quantum
you. In
entanglement?
discussion, they apply. Like you needed to have like a coherent, like back and forth, like yeah, for discursive.
Yeah, which was my point. Which was my point.
Yeah, I agree.
This was a misframing. So coherence does not arise from laws, but from shared recognition. And the proof is simply in everyday speech. For example, if you're in pain and you say "ouch," then that's very understood coherent, and yet it is no syllogism.
It doesn't have to be a syllogism.
Oh, really?
It still uses. Does ouch have an identity?
I believe
Yes,
it's a German word.
In fact, it has to have an
That's
identity for
etymology.
you to have even understood it, right? So, and to dice like this idea of what you're basically saying is superposition is kind of intrinsically paradoxical, and we have a word for it, so that would kind of rebut it. No, because it has an identity, right? And it also can't simultaneously mean the opposite of its identity. Meaning, if it's saying two things are in two different or one thing's in two different positions at the same time, it can't simultaneously mean that one thing can only be in one position at one time. Right? Because that would contradict itself. And it has an identity, which is identified as one thing being in multiple positions at one time. So to create the construct of a word requires the laws of logic.
Okay, so let's do that one as well.
Like location is very important in the law of identity as well, in regards to superposition.
Well, if it's breaking the laws, then you got a problem.
It's not. It's upheld with the principle of locality within the law of identity.
So the law of identity is simply a repetition of what is. And so the verdict is very simple here as well. And to say ouch has identity is to rename presence as logic. So the cry itself, that being ouch, is prior to law. and the logic parasitizes meaning after the fact, and it does not give it. Simple.
Scream is interesting.
You
'Cause,
keep
like,
saying
I feel like-
prior to law. Like, you know, every one of your quote unquote rebuttals start with straw mans. Every single one of them. So, okay, cool. Beating up a straw man. I never said anything. Like you said, coherence is not a law. It's built upon an agreed understanding. I never said that coherence was a law, bro. I never said that.
No, man, it's not a straw to answer your words as spoken, and the cry for straw man is itself the straw. Have fun with that. Bye.
I just specified why I was a straw man, so thanks for trying.
And I also rebutted all of what you said.
By saying
and
nuh-uh.
You just
You
moved the
rebutted by
goalpost.
saying nuh-uh.
No,
You rebutted by
just-
saying nuh-uh.
You're moving the goalpost is the nuh-uh.
No, I didn't move the goalpost. I quoted what you claimed I said, which isn't what I said, which is why it's a straw man. And then your response to that was just calling it a straw man is a straw. So you just said
Yes,
nuh-uh.
just go
so now
into this intonation that makes you sound just ugly. That is a straw man.
Okay. So you just gave up. Okay. You just gave up. I
And
mean,
you
that's not my problem.
Yeah, no problem. You just gave up as well.
I didn't. Again, I'll clear. I'll
Okay.
state it again. Your straw man was that I was claiming that coherence was a law. I never said that. Can you please tell me when I said that? When did I say that? When did I say coherence is a law? Because you came in here like all pretentious saying, first of all, this is very easily refuted. Coherence is not a law. What? Who said it was?
If coherence is not law, then your claim collapses.
It doesn't. My point is
Okay.
that my point was to formulate a coherent statement requires the use of the laws of logic.
It belongs to presence, not to logic.
Okay, bro. It's like just. Oh!
Keep whispering. It sounds.
No,
so
dude,
coherent.
you didn't acknowledge me just now pointing out that what you said was a lie and a straw man. You just ignored it for the third straight time.
So to cut him off. I just had a
No,
conversation on the
you
bus
calling it out is itself
with the
the straw man.
pastor. He overheard my conversation. And like, hold on. Yeah. Hold on 1 second.
You're dodging the point by calling it a straw man.
I didn't
That's
dodge the
actually
point.
what you are doing that.
Fourth time. Here comes the fourth time. I didn't just call it a straw man to dodge a point. I specified why it was a straw man, and then you refused to defend that it's not one because you know it is one, and there's no retort. This is the fourth time I've said it. You came in claiming you were debunking me and said this is so easy to refute. First of all, coherence is not a law. I said, what? I didn't say that. I said to even say a coherent statement requires the laws of logic. Okay, so coherence is an agreed upon concept for us to understand that it has reasoning, sound reasoning, that it can be understood. I never said it was a law. I said that to create something that has sound reasoning that we can equally understand and convey and understand mutual understanding, right, via coherence, to even formulate a statement that achieves mutual understanding, aka coherence, requires the use of the law of logic. And I specified why, and no one in the room ever rebutted the specifics of why, which was that every sentence follows a structure of identity, right? So the word has a meaning and it adheres to the law of non-contradiction because a word cannot mean the opposite of itself at the same time. And it adheres to the excluded middle for a sentence to be coherent. So it's either coherent or it's incoherent. So to speak at all coherently is to concede logic exists.
That's a good point. Did somebody have a refutation for that?
Yeah, there was like one guy, he made a really good point. He said no, and the other guy was like, I don't think so, and the other guy was like, nah, and that was about it.
I would even go.
Where do they get their logic?
Well, somebody, Jake asserted it's just a brute fact, woven into the fundamental nature of reality.
That could come from a civilization of aliens that exists in an alternate reality.
So reasoning is
that.
one mode of speech, not the ground of it. An understanding arises from shared presence long before logic is named. And so to claim that every sentence has identity is only to reclothe the trivial. That which is spoken, and identity adds nothing. So coherent versus incoherent is not a law of logic, but a recognition of sense or nonsense. Presence, not abstraction, grants recognition. So speaking coherently does not concede logic exists as law. It only proves that presence is communicable.
But where
are you arguing
logic?
Now it's obvious that you're reading. So you're like literally reading. We have AI like typing up your responses for you. You read that for sure. Just read that off.
Are you just
Yeah, why
arguing
you
that the
asking
laws
for
of
that?
logic right now? Are you just arguing, Zan, or
That was a
whoever,
straw
that the
man.
laws of logic are not made of words? Because nobody's arguing that either.
No,
What's up?
It wasn't a straw
Okay.
man. That's why it takes you like 1 to 2 minutes to respond because you're waiting for it to type it up. And the responses aren't even addressing what I'm saying. It's basically like you've tasked an AI with prove he's wrong, and so it's just desperately trying to do that, even to the point of just making things up I didn't say. So
No,
I've lost
Quantum
that's
interest.
a straw man.
Quantum did. You lost
Have fun.
identity with Quantum. You lost the identity of and meaning of words once you went into the quantum realm.
I did not. Can you give an example?
Yeah, because you're going to say this is a descriptor for what this is doing, right? But you know that's not accurate to the rest of reality. It's just accurate in quantum.
I asked you to give me an example, and you said, yeah, because you're going to say something. Like, can
Yeah,
you give me an
superposition.
example? Okay,
Things
so
can
let's talk about
exist in two places at one time,
Okay, so let's
but
talk about
not
it.
exist in either.
Okay, let's talk about
Is
it.
that
So does
just a theory?
superpositioning have a meaning? Does it have a definition? Does that word have a definition?
I'll look it up. You want me to look it up?
Well, you basically just gave a decent paraphrased definition of it, right?
Well, so why are you asking me? I don't get what you're
Okay,
doing.
so then you agree that it has a definition. Okay, so then it has an identity, which means it's adhering to
Okay,
the law of it means it's adhering to the law of identity. Okay, it's also adhering to the law of non-contradiction because it cannot simultaneously mean the exact opposite of that definition.
Okay, so it takes on a new identity. So it means two different things. Now these words mean two different things.
No, the word only means one
Yeah.
thing.
You said
No.
you gave it an identity in quantum, but outside of quantum it means something else. So now this
What does
one word has two different meanings.
What does superpositioning mean outside of quantum?
You know what I did earlier before you made your straw man? I wrote down your arguments and then I formalized a reply
guy
and then
didn't
I
answer.
read that reply to you and then you straw man that and now it's not being addressed because, well, you're exposed.
You
That's
did
what-
not write. You did not write the words that passed. And even
Oh,
if you did,
how do you have knowledge of that?
because
And
I
even
can just
if I
tell.
did.
I can just tell.
Okay.
I can tell, and I
yeah.
can tell when people are lying.
Wait,
But
either way,
even if you
I
did,
can read it.
conveniently enough, even if you did
That's so
do what you
logical
just
of you.
conveniently enough, even if you did do what you just lied and claimed you did,
Appealing to
I
possibility.
still refuted it. So and it didn't address my
No, you
points at
straw
all.
man. No, you just made a straw man, and now you're just speaking a lot of words under stress just to
Okay,
attempt
so
to remove my
since you
voice.
wrote down my argument, what was it?
You said to create something that does not sound reasoning that we can understand, to even formulate a statement that achieves understanding requires logic. Every sentence has identity and more.
More.
So are you saying that
And
there can
like,
never be
how much do you want to hear?
You're saying like there can never be an unspoken word? What's it?
What? No, I didn't say anything like that. I said for us
Well,
to actually have discussion, for us to.
I heard that.
You know, why is everyone
I'm
taking this in
focusing on
such
a
a bad
specific part, like where you
My point
say
is
like just to
simple.
have a word, it has to have identity, and the fact that we can identify the word adheres to logic. So that's why I'm just kind of taking it a step further and saying, like, there's no such thing as an unspoken word. But anyhow,
Well, there can be, but even inside your mind, right? You identify what it means. But like the actual point that started
Mind is an
for like the
abstraction.
desperate pedantic attempts to claim it was wrong or whatever, was that for us to even communicate, for us to like have any type of discussion, for us to use language itself and to speak coherently amongst each other, discussing ideas or conveying ideas, requires the prerequisite, right? There's a prerequisite of the laws of logic being admitted and conceded.
We should all agree on this. It's not that difficult. I would even go further to say that even when people aren't speaking coherently, they're still applying logic because they're identifying certain words, right? It might not make sense to us, but they're still identifying words and then putting them in a precise order, right? First word, second word, third word. So
That's
even when
Yeah, the law of identity, Eden, being universal is what makes language possible across different languages. Yeah.
So
It's necessary.
Pierre brought up a great point because this is going to be brought up with non-believers. Superpositioning. Do we actually have evidence of this superposition of something being?
No.
Okay.
I don't think it's about having the
Yeah,
evidence.
wasn't
I
the
think
point.
it's about the words being used to describe these things, like the wave, like even like wave particle, right? It's like, well, which one is it? It's like it's both, but it's a wave, but it's a particle, but it's both. You get what I mean? It's like the way you
Right.
describe it. It's like, all right, well, we have a problem with applying logic to that.
So let's
'Cause
refute
it's
what
like
he said.
contradicting.
He
Right.
just again said, I've written it down, so, for us to even communicate, for us to use language itself, for us to speak coherently among ourselves requires the prerequisites of the laws of logic admitted and conceded. Okay, great. So
You didn't write that down, by the
communication-
way. You have the audio being looped into AI. But go ahead.
Oh, that's what you believe.
I know that. There's no way you wrote it that fast
Great,
as I
Strawman.
spoke and got it
No,
exactly
no.
correct. There's a 0% chance. There's a zero.
You went to the 0. I'm starting to
I know
fake math.
it's embarrassing. It's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is embarrassing, Witsit, because I actually did write that. It's really
you
embarrassing. Yes, I did. I totally did.
Okay, totally, man. Go ahead. Read off what the AI said back.
Yeah. Great strawman, Witsit. Even before I started. Communication is older than logic. Have fun
Now
with that one.
Now you're trying to paraphrase what it said.
Cope with communication being older than logic. Have fun. Language is not born from logic. Have fun.
Right? How can communication
Coherence is not conceded law, but recognition of meaning and presence. Have fun with that too.
Okay, let's go with that, Zanik. I think Austin wants to go take a stab. Go at that.
Yeah. How is communication older than logic?
Okay, so an infant and an animal, etc., gestures and cries, they convey meaning without any law admitted.
The existence of the laws themselves aren't contingent. I'm responding to you. I'm not bumping anything. So the existence of the laws themselves are not contingent upon any type of acknowledgement.
So that's what you have collapsed them into. Okay, amazing.
Nope.
The existence, I'll say it again, maybe you didn't follow. The existence of the laws themselves are not contingent upon acknowledgement.
Yeah, that's what I said to you earlier, Zant, that the laws of logic are not made of words. It's not the law of identity. That's not the law. It's not made out of words.
Like, yeah, the infant may not be able to coherently acknowledge it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's kind of like saying, like, good doesn't exist until someone comes to the spiritual maturity of acknowledging objective morality. No, good exists whether or not someone believes in subjective morality, right? Like, it exists independent of our acknowledgement of it. Like, this comes down to like the basic argument of objective truth. Like, does objective truth exist? And does said objective truth exist, regardless of whether or not we acknowledge its existence or know what it is? And the answer is, of course, yes.
Amazing.
It exists independent of our acknowledgement.
Completely false. It's man-made. So when you say that it holds without acknowledgement, that is simply to crown it without witnessing. You're attempting to make like this supreme authority that simply holds you hostage to it.
What you just basically asserted that it was man-made. That's like what we're trying to.
You're the one believing that it isn't.
Okay, can you articulate why it is, or how it is?
Because it is. Can you, other than by a belief that it isn't, articulate why
I just did,
it
yeah.
comes anteceding a human being, let's say?
I just did, right? Like you just offered dogmatism, right?
No, you just made mysticism and said
that it
exists objectively.
There's no mysticism, right? You just said it's just not, and that doesn't address my point, right? I even used the analogy of objective truth. You responded by saying it's man-made. Were you saying that objective truth is man-made? Or are you saying that the analogy isn't analogous?
So logic is not objective truth.
That's true. That's why it's an analogy. But are you saying it's not analogous? Do you understand the point being made? Which is like the point in the analogy is something can exist whether or not we acknowledge it. So I think we obviously both agree on that, right?
You do realize that demanding to admit to logic as a prerequisite is to confuse the map with the land?
No, that's your interpretation of it, but that was, yeah, can you answer?
Can something exist?
Are you confusing grammar with being, Witsit?
No, I'm asking you, can something exist without us acknowledging it?
Yes.
Of course.
Right, okay. So same with objective truth, right? Like objective truth, do you agree objective truth exists?
Bro, objectives is just jargon for reality. That which is independent of your opinion.
Okay.
I put that in AI because I replied so fast to you in such a flow, right? But anyhow,
So
yeah, continue
you believe in objective
with
truth
your
and
weirdness.
objective reality?
No,
So
you're actually talking back and forth
reason.
now. But when you had my exact statements word for word, and then you waited 2 minutes and read off long responses that didn't actually address my points, it was AI. But it doesn't really matter. Like, by the way,
keep doing
that's
that.
what I believe. Yes, that's what I believe. And that isn't actually a shot at your intelligence. Though I actually know you. I know you are intelligent. Okay, that wasn't what that was. That's just what I think. So I still think that, and whatever. So I wouldn't keep bringing it up though, because that's pretty clearly what happened. But this is the point I'm making, right? Like the laws of logic. Because you brought up the example of a baby. Meaning, like, babies can communicate ideas void of like our languages. I agree. Right. In fact, you can even learn the different. You brought up an infant.
Yes, but I did not say that they're communicating ideas.
Okay, what else do you communicate other than ideas?
Oh, you don't know that?
Let me know. Let's hear it.
So when the baby is communicating hungry, is it an idea or is it a statement of a fact?
Both.
Wrong. It's a statement of a fact. It's not.
No, it's actually the word hungry is an idea describing the state of needing food. That's what it is.
Hunger is objective, not subjective. But I guess it could be subjective.
Is it? Is it though?
I don't
Because
know. Starving people that starve to death would say it is.
Okay, I know some really fat people that say they're hungry and definitely aren't starving to death.
Well, that's where I say that it could be both, right? But it certainly can be objective.
Okay, so we have created this word, hungry. It's an idea. But the fact that the baby needs the food is objectively true. Sure. Okay. So it's communicating that it needs the food. Okay. So your argument, which I was trying to still man, right, which is that when I said it's communicating an idea, you want to critique that and say communicating an objective truth. Okay. So the baby's communicating an objective truth that it is hungry or needs food, although it hasn't matured to the point that it can acknowledge the laws of logic. Therefore, communication comes before logic. Is that your argument?
I think that sounded pretty good.
Yeah, the issue with that is that the existence of the laws of logic are not dependent upon that infant, nor that infant's acknowledgement or ability to acknowledge its existence.
Well, but that wasn't the argument, though. It was a matter of being able to communicate and convey a coherent idea, right, or fact, appealing to logic. And he showed you where a baby crying, not using any sort of word, just barbaric communication in terms of grunts or cries or what have you, right, is enough to trigger a response in the sense that it's fulfilling its demand, objective demand.
That wasn't his argument at all. That wasn't his argument at all.
Hunger is not an idea. It is the being itself pressing into expression. So the child is not creating abstract communication of propositions.
Okay, so what Dice just said wasn't your argument, and it wasn't even a response to my argument. And what's happened is there's like this revisionist component of trying to dwindle down what I said, which is that for us to actually have discussions in which we use language and convey coherent ideas requires the use of logic and the acknowledgement of that logic. This is somehow turned into a rebuttal to that statement is that babies can grunt and we can know they're hungry.
Okay,
that's not a rebuttal to my point at all.
So again, communication is older than logic, and infants and animals all convey meaning without any law admitted.
Wait, how do we know communication is older than logic? Because the logic could have been existed before us with the ability to communicate.
Including that baby, yeah. The fact that a baby can communicate prior to understanding logic doesn't mean that communication existed before logic. Those are two totally different things.
When was logic invented?
It isn't dependent upon invention. That's the point.
At creation.
How does it exist?
Creation? Well, through creation.
How does it exist? What's it like? How much does it weigh? Does it require?
What a materialistic reductionist question. It can't exist unless it's observed. It can't exist.
Now because I push anyone who pushes back on you is a materialist. That's awesome.
Instead of getting so emotional, maybe listen to what I said and call you a materialist. I said, what a materialistic reductionist question, because the implication is that something can only exist if you can see it or weigh it.
So I'm asking you, in what form does it exist?
Do you agree things can exist void of being seen, touched, or weighed? Sure. Okay, so it exists in a form that isn't seen, touched, or weighed.
Like space.
It's metaphysical.
Like space.
Or no, it's like thoughts or intuition.
Or space.
And then
if you guys want to 3-0 Witsit like I did the other night, you're gonna have to do harder than this.
At least it seems like we're getting on the same page, right?
No, it's very
negative.
simple.
We'll never be on the same page.
It's very simple. Logic is just simply retrospective, and it's a codification, not genesis.
No, our description of it is retrospective.
That's your belief.
It's not a belief, right? Because I don't need to describe. No, the fundamental order of understanding and reason exists prior to my ability to describe it.
Yes, because everything tangible in your realm right now, surrounding you, was in someone's mind before it was ever created. Right? Your chair, your floor, it was in somebody's mind. So everything that we're experiencing was in the mind of God first. So these laws were created, even perhaps in the mind, and then through creation, the laws became tangible, whether it's physical or metaphysical.
And by the way, the implication that it's an invention of man necessitates the belief that the laws of logic can change.
There are some who believe that. They think that there's different types of logic.
That's a necessary implication of that claim.
Witsit, is logic not a man-made framework for ordering speech and thought?
No, logic itself is not a man-made
oh.
framework. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do you believe
think,
logic can change?
I think you have. So what is it if it's not a man-made framework for ordering speech and thought?
It's pre-existent.
Okay.
It's a pre-existent, fundamental, foundational order of existence. My question
Yeah, I would
was,
say it's
can
the rules of the universe, go ahead.
my question is, can they change? Can the laws of logic change?
I would say if you could change the law of physics, then potentially the law of logic could change. Like, for example, something like a black hole. Like, would the laws of logic still apply in those conditions?
Yes.
Yes.
How so?
Because they're not contingent on the laws of physics.
In fact, the laws of physics are contingent upon them.
Really, to claim that they're pre-existing is to mistake the stability of something being for the rules of speech, which are man-made.
If they're man-made, then they can change. So can the laws of logic change?
Yeah.
Okay, give me an example. How can you change the law of non-contradiction? Go.
To require of me to give that right here and now is actually quite nonsensical. You know,
To ask you to substantiate your
God could
claim is
change.
unreasonable.
I think God could change them.
Oh, we're talking about man, actually. We're not talking about God. They're claiming that they're an invention of man.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't necessarily
Don't
mean
put me in that
I
basket.
can
That
do
was one
that
person
right here
saying that.
now.
I'm just enjoying the pushback. See where
If
it
they're an
goes.
invention, they're an invention of man, right? And they're not an invention of man. The law of non-contradiction exists whether or not we come up with the phrase the law of non-contradiction, and it exists prior to us ever even thinking about coming up with that name. And it exists whether or not we stop using it or we continuing using it till the end of time.
Well, I
The
asked
law
you
of
that
non-
and you ignored it. Why'd you
the
ignore
law
it earlier when I asked you? I said,
didn't.
can logic exist without the mind? Can it have meaning without a mind?
Well, I said that
Actually,
as well. I said
I didn't
it's
actually
observer dependent.
No, you said, oh, that's interesting. That's really
You notice
deep.
how
And
I
you
got
moved
the
on to
not even
something
one
else.
word out, and you went to tell me what I was doing or what I was saying. So it's
Yeah, I
like
was just
what happened
responding to
last
you.
time. What happened last time was I said just a sec. I said that's a good question. Just a second, because you were jumping all the way to the conclusion when there were people in here, atheists, that we were trying to walk through a line of reasoning. Another believer that already knows there's a creator was jumping in, asking like the conclusionary question that's going to deter them from having the good faith discussion in the first place. That's why I said just a second. My answer to you is yes, it requires a mind, or no, it can't exist without one.
So the law of non-contradiction only exists as a formalization after a fact. It's simply an agreement to keep words from collapsing into nonsense. So to say that, for example, a river doesn't flow when it doesn't suddenly, make it collapse. You following?
Oh, I followed
is
it. I
a
just
rule of language.
it's blatantly incorrect, right? Like it isn't strict.
It's only to demand consistency in speech. That's all
No.
that it is.
That isn't all that it is. Okay, well, just saying it doesn't make it true, right? So I'm going to explain why that isn't true.
Saying that it's prerequisite, you're saying that it exists prior, as you did, doesn't mean that that is so. It's just you fueling your belief into it being.
That's not what I did.
Prior, because that's how you. That's your worldview.
No, I explained why, though. The difference in you and I is I explained why. You just use dogmatism over and over. So your claim is incorrect, though. It isn't simply a tool to avoid the confliction of speech. That isn't what it is. Because the river is going to say flow north to south. It can't simultaneously flow south to north. It doesn't matter if I describe the river with words or not.
You didn't explain why. You just compounded your belief.
I did explain why. It doesn't matter if I describe that process or not. In reality, it cannot do the contradiction. I don't have to describe it with words for that to be true. It's true regardless of whether or not I describe it.
You're just borrowing something. This is like concept laundering of objective reality.
I think I could twist a scenario where that's not true.
It just both applies.
No, your concept laundering objective reality
analogy,
to
at
make
least.
the laws of logic you're supposedly, going objective.
No, it's not concept laundering. What you're now realizing is that it's built into objective reality, and you're struggling with that because that conflicts with your conclusion, right? Because the river,
not at all.
The river flowing north to south. Okay, if I walk out to a river and it's flowing from north to south, do you agree that it's doing that in objective reality?
North to south is a human-made signification.
Okay, so it's flowing.
Okay,
it's flowing in
is.
one direction. This is so desperate. Where now you're just saying
It's
that
not-
like
it's
all of
not
our
flowing
concepts can't be used.
Yeah, keep fake laughing. So one
There's no fake here. I
direction
think it's
is very
genuinely retarded.
unison, and a river doesn't flow in one direction.
Really?
Yes, really.
How many
Go
directions
out,
does it
see a
flow?
river.
How many
I
directions does it
mean,
flow?
go out, touch grass, walk in nature, and look at a river.
I grew up by one, so.
Amazing. So you should realize then that the river flows.
Yeah, that's right. It does do that.
Yeah, amazing. So
Can it flow in opposite directions simultaneously?
could you please go to a river and tell me all the direction it flows in?
Can it flow in opposite directions simultaneously?
Yes.
How so?
Have you seen a river?
Downhill, but only
Yeah.
down. Like if it's let's say, but it's still.
Well, have you ever
uphill.
seen like a salmon swimming up?
A double donut pool.
A salmon is not the river, dude. Come on.
It's stupid. It's like, and you can use any
No, but
example.
it's
Can the door
swimming
can the door be open and closed at the same time?
No.
Right. Okay. So do you agree the door is either open or closed in objective reality?
Yes. Even
Okay.
even with
It's in superposition.
No, they don't even agree in objective reality. They're lying. What if you're a million light years away and the time? Yeah, they want their cake and eat it too.
What if
They
the
don't
door
get
door's in
objective
superposition?
reality.
This is weird because, by the way, you guys know that superposition is just an idea, right? It's actually formulated from the mathematical discrepancy within their models.
It's a 0 and a 1 at the same time.
That's what they're
Like,
claiming.
I just want you guys to know, though, that superposition is not like an observable phenomena. It's a byproduct of the mathematical discrepancy within the quantum models.
Yeah, let's stop with the deflections too. Like this conversation will never end if people are constantly jumping in and deflecting.
It should be like pretty.
I'm not jumping in to deflect. They do not get objective reality. You're going to ask them a question about their objective reality, and then they go, "Yeah." It's like, well, where the fuck did that come from? Where do they manifest their objective reality from? In this
Well, I
paradigm?
asked them earlier if they existed, if they agree with objective truth, but the sentiment's really simple and it's really undeniable. The door is open or it's closed. It can't simultaneously be opened and closed. Okay.
So if superposition with it though, if superposition isn't real, then how can in the double slit experiment, how can a photon interact with itself and create an interference pattern?
Major deflection. Major deflection.
Off key now.
Yeah, major deflection. I do have an explanation for the double slit, but I'm not talking about that right now. So if you're asking like one of the most profound questions in the history of physics, that like really is it the time to do that in the middle of the conclusion here? Like, okay, so the door can be opened or closed. It can't be both opened and closed, right? That's the law of non-contradiction. So whether or not we have that phrase, the law of non-contradiction, that truth exists regardless of whether or not we acknowledge it or come up with a phrase to describe the phenomena. The door can still just in objective reality be open or closed, not both, right? And that's the point. That logic, that law of logic, which is that it can't be doing opposite things simultaneously, that law of logic is pre-existent. It doesn't care about you or what you want to say about it. It exists before you, outside of you, independent of you. And communication or our ability to communicate that idea. It doesn't require the acknowledgement of the idea. It just exists.
Or there'd be multiple realities.
Yeah, so stating that fact doesn't make logic exist pre-requiring.
I explained why.
Can I ask about the nature
No, you
of
did
like
not.
what is a
You
closed
just
door?
stated
Well, you
an-
could have
a
a
fact.
you could have a door open and closed at the same time if it was like a one-way door, right? Like one of those revolving doors. Like technically it's closed off from one side, but
that's not what I
never
mean.
technically closed off.
This is when
Well,
do
you mean,
you guys remember when like Jeremy and I like a year and a half ago Glovers would come in here and we were trying to get them to be honest about like the difference in Newtonian and Einsteinian physics and we had to boil it down to the law of non-contradiction to try to get them to honestly concede, and they so desperately wanted to push back that they started denying the law of non-contradiction, and like we all lost it. And now somehow I'm sitting here once I've come back after 9 months and I'm arguing with flat earthers about the law of non-contradiction.
I'm just having fun with it, man. Don't take it so.
I'm just saying, like it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. It's an experience for me.
But within
well,
like this,
sometimes it's fun to challenge things.
Your logic is simply that you are, or paradox really is that you simply are washing reality in the dye of logic, and you're selling it back as a proof of its pre-existence.
Well, it seems
That
like
was-
maybe
that was just
you're the
word
only
dressing.
one here.
No, it was
Is
not
anyone
word
else
salad.
with Sanic? Like,
I didn't say
if
word
we were
salad, I
to
said
make a consensus.
Hey, that metaphor was pretty good. I have to say.
what the door
How?
closed metaphor.
Yeah, the washing reality in the dye of logic and then selling it back as if it was the original.
That's not a metaphor, really, and that's not a rebuttal. Like he said that his initial claim before the interjection there was like that I was just stating it. Basically, like, he accused me of dogmatism. Like that's not what happened. Like I explained that it's just a fact of reality, just an objective fact of reality that the door is either open or closed. It can't be simultaneously opposite. Therefore, that fact exists whether or not we acknowledge it or describe it with a phrase.
The scenario of an objective
So-
reality stands regardless of us.
Yeah, and then you said I just baselessly asserted my conclusion because of my bias. No, I didn't. I explained it specifically, right? And that's just one example. There's also the law of identity. There's the excluded middle. There are many laws of logic, and those laws of logic, they exist without us. And this is why if you're saying it's just an invention of men, you have to be able to support that statement by claiming that they can change and explaining how that's true. Like, how can the law of non-contradiction not apply to that door? You're gonna have to change it to claim it's just an invention.
So, like, what's the nature of close? I mean, I assume you've got an answer to this, but a door closed is like a door that has just been, like, without a lock mechanism, it's just been closed and it's held there by its own sort of inertia, right? Versus like a door closes and it's locked, only a person with a particular key can get through it. So it's not closed to that person. So I'm just kind of curious, what do you mean by this? I know it's just an analogy. I'm not trying to hold you to account on it, but the nature of closed is then up for grabs as far as the definition, right? I don't understand why that's necessarily.
Well, you don't understand. Like, we close the door, it latches in, it's closed. We open the door and it's open. It can't be both of those at the same time.
But in order for that to be right, I mean, okay, so it's open to a person, or is it like open as in like there's air that can transpire through, or it's sealed, or it's a glass door in which only light can pass through? Like, I don't know. I'm just fully exploring that.
What are you doing? Why are you doing
Well, I'm just trying to work out
The
when
whole
you
room
say
is
door is
desperately
closed.
trying to pedantically find how I'm wrong somehow. I don't know.
Dude, I'm just trying to explore the idea, and you seem to take it personally. That's up to you.
No, it's just dumb.
I just want to
It's
know
so
when you're
dumb.
using that analogy, right? How far can we push that analogy? Because I mean, you say a door's closed, and I'll say, well, it's not closed to that person with a particular lock or the key to that lock. And I'm just trying to work out how far the analogy goes.
This is why they say the devil's in the details. Fucking wizardry everywhere.
It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Whatever the agreed interpretation of the close is, right? You can do the same thing if I said either my shoe is off or on. You could be like, well, what if it's halfway on? What if the shoes are untied? It's like, okay, well, let's use some good
Then
laws.
So, I mean, it's not the law of non-contradiction, because it's the definition of the contradiction that's up for grabs at that point. I'm just trying to work out how does it actually, like, when you take a logic,
I answered your
an
question.
instantiation law of
No, you did not.
non-contradiction,
You did
and then
not
you try
steal
to
my
apply
brick.
when you try to apply it to the material world, there's all these sort of definitional changes on the nature of what is a closed or an open door. I mean, I'm not trying to get you or gotcha. I'm not trying to challenge you even. I'm just like, how far did have you thought about this? No one else seems.
I said when it closes and latches, so therefore it stays in place on its own, closed.
And then we can even
There's
take it
so
to
many
examples.
interjections. We're never getting to any points, and we're having like if a bunch of different people come in trying to debate their own thing, nobody's ever going to come to a conclusion.
To be fair, like,
What?
I've talked a long time
It's
and
an
I'm just like
open
repeating
forum.
my conclusion. At this point, I'm just kind of repeating myself. Like, so other people can talk. I'll just say my conclusion one more time. It's pretty simple. Like, the claim that the laws of logic are just an invention.
Stop
just an
interrupting.
Sorry.
The claim that, like, the laws of logic is just an invention of men requires the claim that they can change. My point is similar to objective truth. It exists whether or not you acknowledge it, right? Like, there's objective reality, there's objective truth. Things exist or are true or a certain way, whether or not we acknowledge it. The laws of logic are the same way, right? The law of contradiction exists. Something cannot simultaneously be the opposite of itself simultaneously, right? And that's a fact, whether or not we've created the phrase, the law of non-contradiction, right? So that's the point.
And it can be justified.
Do you consider? Let me just ask Witsit this one question. Witsit, do you consider the laws of logic descriptive or prescriptive?
By the way, if someone's going to rebut him, let's have one person. So just Jake go back and forth with Witsit. When they're done, we go to someone else, because otherwise it gets too disjointed, like Taylor was saying. So
If other people from the opposing side, then other people from this side should be able to jump in as well from each side.
Well, I mean, I just
When you
jumped
say
in, and
descriptive
it's an
or
open forum. It's not on a
prescriptive-
stage, so I don't get the nature of the chaos. I've
Jake.
been listening for a half hour or so.
I think
Can you describe what you mean?
be able to add there.
all right, Jake, well, you got to say your point again. Go.
I get. Well, you know what I mean by that, Witsit, right? Like,
What you mean,
are
like,
the laws
what
of
a
logic
description of
descriptive
what
the
is? Good.
Right, like where the laws of logic, with the laws of logic come first, and then the universe was created. Hold on a second, babe. And then the universe came based on those laws, came afterward, or are the laws of logic simply describing characteristics of the universe that we live in?
Yeah, it's the first. It's prescriptive. It's a rule guideline.
Could
or
a universe
command.
be created that? Could a universe exist that don't follow the laws of logic?
No.
Called hell.
And what's your evidence that it's not possible to have a universe that doesn't follow the
Because
laws?
our universe came from a prime being and a prime creator, and that prime creator has attributes.
Well, that wouldn't be my answer right now. Because they're
I
gonna
think
jump all
that
over
is
that.
the fundamental. Well, wouldn't you agree, though, Witsit, that's kind of the fundamental crux where we at, is you think that they're prescriptive, and we think that they're descriptive. We think it's an intrinsic property of the universe the way it exists, and it's just the way that humans describe it, where you're saying that, no, the laws of logic were fundamental to the creation of the universe and came even before the universe's creation.
Yeah, but if you're saying it's a foundational, fundamental nature of existence itself, then, like, that requires that it came before it. So, like, the description argument is that actually it didn't exist until we came up with it. And that's very different than it was here until then we described it, right? But yeah, I would say it came before him because it's pre-existent. I would not really fall into that binary per se, because my understanding of descriptive versus prescriptive is like descriptive is to describe what is, and prescriptive is like what ought to be, like a more idealized rule. But like in the context of what we're discussing, like sure, I would say prescriptive as in it came before the universe, like the material like the matter and energy.
Just because you fancy prescription doesn't mean that it is prescription.
No. The reason that it is because it exists independent of our acknowledgement.
Prescription means command, meaning you must, you shall, you cannot. And reality does not prescribe. Stones they fall, the rivers run, and fire burn, and that is without decree. So you saying logic prescribes is only within language. You must not contradict. You must be consistent.
You see
These
what
are
happened?
rules of discourse and not rules of being. So you are paradoxically doing what you're saying it is not, which is that you're making man-made rules and imposing them upon language or communication, and you're acting as God.
You see what just happened? Like I pointed out that technically isn't an accurate binary and explained why. And then I said, but like in good faith and context and what you're trying to ask, I answered it. And then he jumped in to point out that like if you are being technically accurate, then I'm wrong. And then strawman me with that, like that's just super bad faith. But I will explain this point, right? It's very simple, bro. Like, and I've said this like 10 times. These laws exist whether or not we acknowledge them. Meaning if there was a period of human history that people had not realized that they were there, meaning like people didn't never really get to the ontological point of philosophizing and be like, wait, let's think of this. Okay, things can only exist. We can actually write these down with the language and explain these laws of logic. They still existed. In fact, they still used them. And I would even push back on this idea that Jake was saying, was 1-2, right? Which is like even further, there's a proof that it's built into nature, because when you say like the rock dropped and that's not because of the creator, that's actually not true, because everything that seeks equilibrium, the fact that every system seeks equilibrium proves that there is a state of equilibrium that it is going to, thus denoting a law that governs how it behaves. The fact that it's even going to a state of equilibrium or seeking one means that the natural order that's built into this place intrinsically is that all systems seek that ordered place. So that actually requires intelligent agency as well. The very laws of physics are dependent upon the laws of logic, which are dependent upon an intelligent agent. So physics proves God. Like just the fact that systems seek equilibrium, opening a soda proves God. Like dropping a baseball proves God. It proves an intelligent designer.
No, equilibrium is not obedience to logic nor proof of agency.
I mean, I don't know if I explained that well, but do you think, like, could you still know what I'm saying? Because, like, yeah, do you get what I'm saying? Because I might not have explained it well, but, like, do you know what I'm saying?
Well, you're definitely attempting to say something.
Okay, I'll explain it. So, like, we know that, like, okay, if you were to really boil physics down into one simple statement, you could say all systems seek equilibrium. And I would actually add via pressure mediation. And I would say that that's the one true natural law, but all systems seek equilibrium. Like there's no exception to that. Every system is seeking equilibrium, right? That's what they do. So the fact that it's seeking equilibrium means it's seeking an ordered state, which means there is a pre-existent, ideal, ordered state that it's trying to get to. And the fact that everything that exists, all the way down to the smallest scale, obeys that law or that system of order, like everything is trying to get to this ordered primary position of equilibrium. The fact that that exists proves that an intelligent agent actually wrote that law.
To make that equilibrium be the equilibrium and not some other state or some other layer or some other like level of what equilibrium is, you mean?
Yeah, just the fact that everything that exists has to adhere to that shows like a supreme authority of order. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Like the water level is where it levels instead of at some other area of the
Yeah,
atmosphere.
or that some water goes level and some water doesn't, right? Like it's like everything. Like if I open up a gas container and it fills the available space, like what it's doing is trying to get to an equalized state. Everything does that. And that just shows you that there is an equalized state, and that existence of an equalized state is an idealized state. And so it's like order, idealized order. And the fact that there is an idealized ordered state that everything is trying to get to proves that there is an author of that order.
Okay, so balance is not an ideal, it is actual. And if it is an ideal, it is man-made into being an ideal. You jumping from law to lawgiver, that is simply a myth. You're attempting to smuggling in God under the mask of science.
You're saying that's a myth? You're saying you can have a law without a lawmaker? What enforces the law then?
Well, you're calling balance a law. That is a metaphor.
Equilibrium.
Okay, well, equilibrium is still not seeking. That is
No.
projecting a being onto it.
Well, it's just a phrase that we use for intents and purposes. Like systems migrate to a state of equilibrium.
Yeah, but it's not seeking that. It's just how forces balance when left to presence.
It's not sentiently seeking it. Sure, that's just pedantic.
Yeah, exactly. Although, and to continue, to call it an ideal ordered state is simply a projection. That is your story of perfection laid upon simple balance.
It's not balance. It's equilibrium. Like equilibrium is not interchangeable with the word balance. No, it's not.
An equilibrium is just jargon.
Okay, because you say so. I mean, whatever. It's not. So, and do you agree that all, like, without the pedantic diversion of the word seek, right? Do you agree that all systems seek equilibrium?
I'm rather curious if a stone reads statutes and if the river consults decree, because that's what you're saying.
You doubled down on it, bro? Really?
Yeah, they're not sentient, are they? What's it?
No, I already said that.
I don't know if this is a good.
You see the contradiction in your own statement, then.
It's not a contradiction.
I don't know if this is a good example, but if you cut yourself, the cut will, scab and then heal, and then eventually it'll go back to being. I mean, there could be a scar, but let's say there's not a scar; it's just a regular cut. There is an equilibrium that the skin wants to go back to being in its original state before the cut. Is that a good?
Correct.
example?
Yeah, and even with the scar, it attempted to, right? There's just something inhibiting it. Like, it's pretty amazing. And if you actually extrapolate this out, let's just put whatever prefaces and disclaimers are needed for people not to spiral and try to like attack me over it or whatever. It's like if you extrapolate this with ether, if that's the primary state, and then disequilibrium is what gives us everything else, right? Like matter and energy. All of that matter and energy is attempting, loosely used, to get back to that primary state of equilibrium, right? Or true rest, inertia, right?
So your first argument was that all systems seek equilibrium. So first and foremost, equilibrium is not a seeking or not seeking itself. In thermodynamics, it's simply the state of maximum entropy compatible with constraints. So it is not a goal or an intention and not a choice. It is simply a statistical outcome of interactions. Secondly, you said that therefore equilibrium implies an ideal ordered state. Equilibrium is not an ideal order. Yeah, it is not perfection. It is stasis. So equilibrium often means disorder, that of maximum entropy, not ideal order. So the claim that equilibrium equals ideal order is a semantic projection and not physics.
This is a fundamental misunderstanding, dude. So
no, that's a
it looks like you
straw
just it's like this is what would happen. How do I straw man? I haven't said anything yet.
You just said it's a fundamental misunderstanding.
Yeah, that's not a straw man. Okay, so anyway, like this is like if you Google the second law, it'll say it's about order and disorder and chaos and stuff
So
like
now
that.
we're on to Googling.
Please stop, man. So like what you're conflating, right, is like the actual process of moving or migrating towards equilibrium in the state itself, right? You said equilibrium is like equates. So is there hot mic or something? Equilibrium equates to disorder. No, it doesn't. Like there can be chaos or disorder while it's trying to get to the state of equilibrium. Right, and I would actually argue that like you can't get to a true state of inertia or equilibrium in the material world, right? Because everything's intrinsically vibrating, even on the smallest scale, so it's not actually at rest. True rest is unattainable, but that doesn't mean it's not being sought.
You're helping me. Thanks. You do realize that when law is used in physics, it's a metaphor to mean regularity of observation. So there is no prescriptive force. A falling stone is not obeyed, it simply falls.
What? Okay, I didn't even use the word law. So
you did. You said that the state implied pre-existing law, that of equilibrium.
Okay, but I didn't use the word law the way you just critiqued it. Okay, which is as if I conflated the loose use of the word law in modern science, meaning just regularity. No, it's like, okay, it always happens. So until you can find an exception, right, you cannot justify the claim otherwise. So if it's not just regularity, it always happens. doesn't regularly happen. It always happens.
But
Right.
you do realize that natural regularities are described as laws after observation, and they are not written by agency.
You know the difference in natural law and scientific law?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Do you know the difference in scientific law and natural law?
But you think I don't, so please enlighten me.
I think you probably do, actually. So, but like, I'm asking because your critique implies that you're conflating them. I don't know if you're doing it on purpose, but you know, like scientific laws, like we come up with an idea and it like seems to pretty much hold based on what we know. Natural law, and it also encompasses a causal claim, right? With natural law, we're not even making a causal claim. Like we're just stating, like we're just observing what always happens and we're writing it down, right? That's all we're doing.
Then duly noted, but no, I'm not making a conflation. Equilibrium is simply a statistical outcome of forces, and order or law is simply an abstraction men impose upon that outcome.
No, this is the same problem that we ran into earlier, right? Like if something always happens, that's true whether or not we come up with a quote unquote natural law to describe it. And you can replace the word seek with other words, right? Like all systems migrate toward equilibrium, tend towards, move towards, progress towards, whatever.
Man, you know that the true conflation is right? You're treating statistical balance as proof of pre-written law, then leaping to a lawgiver out of God.
There's no statistics here. Like it's just always. Can you explain? Can you provide? Like the burden's on you, but it should be pretty easy. You just have to provide one singular example of it not being true.
So again, equilibrium is statistical outcome of forces.
I think what he's saying is
It's not just statistical because it happens all the time. It's not just a matter of percentages.
Yeah, like it's basically like you're arguing against the second law of thermodynamics. Can you present one example of a system that doesn't adhere to it?
I think the problem we're running into here, Witsit, is equilibrium. You know, the fact that systems seek equilibrium. You agree that there's no agency involved in that, right?
In the actual
but
matter
in a way, you're
that's doing
saying,
it, yeah.
Yeah, but because it's just a fundamental property of our reality, right? But in a way, you're saying that, oh, you see how this is seeking equilibrium? That means that there's an agent behind this process, because
No.
you know, otherwise this process wouldn't exist.
That's not what my
And
argument was.
you're kind of boiling that down to the laws of logic. The laws of logic are simply a fundamental part of our reality, in the same way the equilibrium is system seeking equilibrium, and you're applying agency to that. Oh, well, there must be an agent to create the laws of logic.
No. You butchered that pretty bad, man. Like my argument was not that there must be agency behind the process. My argument was that the process is to get to a state. The fact that that state exists and everything adheres to the need to try to get to that state proves intelligent agency created an ideal place or state for all things to pursue.
That's right, Jake. You were just introducing something else, a different proposal.
So, to continue with what we were talking about, simply a fact that balance occurs consistently does not transform it into a command. It only shows repeatable tendency.
What? Can you repeat that?
So, it was said that it's not statistical because it happens all the time. We were talking about equilibrium. Yeah? You remember that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm saying to you that the very fact that balance occurs consistently does not transform it into a command. It only shows repeatable tendency.
You keep using these words like statistics and tendency and regularity, implying there is an exception. But you're going to have to justify those claims because there's not an exception, right? So can you show, and it's effectively amounted to a challenge of the second law of thermodynamics. So can you point to a system in reality that doesn't adhere to the second law?
Can I ask a more sensible question?
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't things moving towards equilibrium just be the result of natural laws without agency?
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, the existence of the natural law that everything has to adhere to, this specific natural law, is moving it towards, like actually necessitating that it go towards an ideal state. And so the creation of an ideal ordered state and a law that governs that everything is trying to get to that ideal ordered state necessitates intelligent agency. And so, like, and
That's
also,
a leap there. That's a leap there. What's it?
So,
well, you can give me an
the question-
example. You can give me an example of a law without intelligent agency.
Yeah, let's let Left Lane respond because he asked, Left Lane, doesn't there have to be a lawmaker to be a law? Doesn't something have to order the law?
I mean, it requires a presupposition, but I think in thinking about it, if everything does make it to equilibrium, I think everything will cease. Everything will stop.
I agree with that. I think that actually nothing gets there. Nothing in the material world actually gets there because it wouldn't be here anymore. But and you know what's even the extrapolation goes even further because we're discussing the second law. I don't try to overly complicate the second law. I think it's been mystified. It's really simple that systems seek equilibrium and systems use energy to do that. That's what the second law is. But that being the case, that means the amount of usable energy in total is decreasing because it's being used in the system. And if that system is the universe itself, the total amount of usable energy in the universe is decreasing. So then that means it had to have a beginning, right? Because it can't decrease infinitely. It can't decrease from no beginning. And, you know, the mainstream, to be fair, does in fact claim a beginning as the majority position. They claim the Big Bang. But when we go back to the first law of thermodynamics, where matter cannot be created nor destroyed, well, if it can't be created, how did it get here? And you can't say it was just always here because we just found out we need a beginning. So now we need it to be created. Now the question is, what's the antecedent to creation?
That is a jump. So to first talk about the second law of thermodynamics. Well, first and foremost, it's not applied by systems. It's a statistical generalization of observed behavior, meaning a physicist has formulated it to describe the behavior after observation, meaning, you know, it's a repeated thing that happens and is now formalized. So to ask for, well, an exception to that is to mistake the second law for what it is, because it's not a prescriptive statute, but a probabilistic description of energy distribution. So there is no exception, or that no exception is observed, does not mean the systems are obeying a pre-existing command. You follow?
Well, I follow. I disagree. The probabilistic distribution is within the process itself, but regardless, the process always takes place. So the probability is not in whether or not the process takes place. The probability is within the distribution of the energy once it always takes place. The fact it always takes place makes it a natural law unless there's an exception. And, you know, specifically, I then brought up the other argument for like Left Lane, like someone more in a secularist boat, but it doesn't matter in general. Because, yeah, like that's my rebuttal to you. Right, like you brought up the probabilistic distribution, yeah, but it's not probabilistic as in sometimes the second law exists, or here's the probability that it'll take place. It always takes place, and then there's a probabilistic distribution within how it takes place. So, you know, the point is like, do we have any example of a system that it doesn't take place? It doesn't matter what probability of the said distribution occurs within it taking place. It always does take place one way or the other.
But that's not really the point of dispute. What you're doing right now is that you're actually confusing the map with the land. Because saying that distribution is within the process is simply that. Probability is a mathematical model that men apply after the fact to describe the outcome, and that is what it is. The process itself does not contain, as you say, probability. It simply happens. So you can have a dice roll, gases expand and heat dispersing. You know, these are events. Probability is our framework for predicting and summarizing them. So what is present is outcome, and what is within is only a symbol.
Well, it's not it's not the only thing that's present. The outcome isn't the only thing that's present. There's the process and then the outcome. And just the fact that that process occurs to get to the outcome is what the second law is about. And it's simply an acknowledgement that it always occurs, right? And if it always occurs, it's using energy to do that. And so there's no logical avenue to get to where you would say that the second law doesn't apply to the universe as a whole, certainly within a naturalistic framework, right? Like within a naturalistic framework, you have to adhere to natural law. I mean, that's like foundational. And then if there's the amount of usable energy is decreasing if it's being used, and so the universe has a certain amount of usable energy, it's being used, thus that amount is decreasing. And so for it to decrease, it has to have a beginning to decrease from, right? Which is my bigger point. And the fact that it has a beginning means if I look at the first law where matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, and again, this has to be adhered to within a naturalistic framework. If it can't be created or destroyed, well, the only way to satisfy the question, did the matter and energy get here, is, well, it's always been here. Well, it can't have always been here because we just found out it has to have a beginning, just applying the first and second law of thermodynamics, which are foundational within naturalism. So now we have, wait, okay, it can't have always been here. What's the other option? That it was placed here. It was created. And so in order to say that it was created, right, we're going to have to violate the first law. And to violate the first law, we're going to have to invoke something attributed to a force, or invoke a force attributed to something not limited to the laws of nature. So now we've invoked a force that isn't limited to the laws of nature, which by definition is supernatural. And if it is creating the all matter and energy that's here, then the question is, wait, what? So what's the antecedent of creation? So what you're left with, simply using naturalism, is the need for an external, eternal, supernatural creator that created all matter and energy in the universe. And then you might as well just say God at that point.
Can I ask what you mean by we found out it needs a beginning?
Yeah, because of the second law, if you apply it to the universe, right, that basically entropy will increase, systems seek equilibrium, and they use energy to do that, if you will, in really kind of simplistic terms. So the entropy increases and the amount of usable energy decreases. And so since the amount of usable energy is decreasing, it has to have a beginning point to decrease from, right? It can't decrease infinitely, nor can you rewind that clock all the way back and have no beginning. It has to have a beginning point to decrease from. And the way that Stephen Hawking said it is he used the analogy of human progression. There had to be a beginning point for humans to progress from. So if the amount of usable energy is decreasing, it had to have a beginning point to decrease from, and now we have a beginning. Which I do think it's funny, right? Like most kind of like your average agnostic atheist or naturalist believes in the Big Bang. But as soon as this comes up, the first law, and how did all the matter and energy get here, they quickly throw out the Big Bang and say, well, it was always here. But either way,
to my understanding of the Big Bang, it's that all that energy was already contained within that, right? Not that it created it.
So all the matter and energy in the universe was always here.
So, sorry for
Well,
interrupting.
it doesn't matter. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Because you're going to have to invoke a beginning.
Well, you are doing now what's called a cosmological move. You are, well, as you said, has to have a beginning. So the second law is derived from bounded systems and not from the universe as a whole. And to extend that, there is to extrapolate, not observe.
We have the firmament.
So saying that usable energy is a relative measure defined against frames we choose, it does not prove a single universal beginning point, as you so proclaim. And to say must have is inference and not presence, and no one has witnessed the origin of all energy. So what is observed is local transitions and not cosmic beginnings. Through your line of speech, you're actually exposing the very fact that you are promoting your belief about what it is. You're not actually speaking objective fact.
Yeah, that's untrue, right? Because
no, it's not.
In order to make, first of all, the implication is that things don't exist unless we observe them.
That is the thing with it. You say the implication. Implication is not objective fact. It is interpretation.
Your implication. Your implication is that things don't exist unless we observe them. Further, that the second law.
No, I never said that. I never said that.
No, yeah, that's why I said it's an implication. It's actually a necessary implication of what you said. And
no, it's not.
Okay, so then it is, right? Because you're saying no, that's not true because we haven't observed it. And even setting that aside, right? Like it does require the claim that the second law of thermodynamics does not apply to the universe.
But you're the one doing the cosmological move. The second law is still derived from bounded systems, not from the universe as a whole. So I'm telling you, you're doing an extrapolation, not an observation. You are interpreting significance so that God can be smuggled into science. It's
No. These are like, do you not realize that it was a debate amongst atheists for centuries, right, about whether or not there was a beginning? It was only a reluctant acknowledgement there must have been due to the second law, and that had nothing to do with some dishonest attempt to smuggle in God, seeing as how they have an extreme bias. But they weren't smuggling in God. They had a bias against God, and they never acknowledged God. And the fact that they did it doesn't mean it's true. That isn't my argument. I'm just making the point that's why I quoted Stephen Hawking, was to avoid that accusation. The point is that for what you're saying to be true, it would require the second law not apply to the universe as a whole, right? And even if you're saying, well, I'm not making that claim, I'm just saying it's possible, you're going to have to substantiate that possibility. Like even just reasonably, like with reason, right? Because it's special pleading. You're claiming the exception to a universal principle.
No, I'm not. I did not make a claim here. I only informed what the second law is and what is it derived from, and your actions.
You are making a claim intrinsically when you say something is possible. For example, when someone says that they're atheists, and they're like, "I'm not making a claim."
Yes, I don't
Right.
disagree with this. I
Okay,
don't
okay. Well,
disagree
it's the
with
same
that.
thing here. It's the same thing here, right? Like if you're saying, well, you're assuming that the second law applies to the whole universe, and that's not from observation, then intrinsic within that critique is the claim that it's possible the second law doesn't apply to the universe.
Isn't that the same claim you have to do with God though? You're not observing God.
I never said that we were observing God.
But my question is, aren't you doing the same thing he's doing at that point?
I'm justifying. The difference is I'm actually justifying my position.
Well, you're justifying it through opinion.
What's the opinion?
Makes coherent sense for you.
What's the opinion though, right?
So far.
I'm just saying that the second law applies to the universe. So if someone disagrees with that, that's cool. They just need to justify the disagreement. They need to substantiate the possibility that it doesn't.
Well, there's the thing. You also, as you know, have to substantiate the claim that it does, but all that does is appeal to possibility.
No. My argument is the second law applies to all observable systems, all matter, all energy, all systems that can be observed, that are known to exist. And so to claim that suddenly that universal principle doesn't apply is special pleading. It's claiming the exception to a universal principle, which is the definition of special pleading. Like the second law of thermodynamics is just a natural law. It's not even a cause claim, right? Like what's the cause of entropy? No one knows. It's not about that, right? It's just like entropy always increases, systems seek equilibrium, the amount of usable energy decreases. Second law, just applies. And so like it's special pleading to say that the universe could exist without the second law applying. Because it exists everywhere else. I mean, and then you could extrapolate even further, right? You could say, of course, the universe is made up of the smaller parts. So even on the local scale, you go all the way to the quantum, then to the local, and you start to work your way out to the cosmological scale. The cosmological scale is comprised of the smaller scales, and we see that the second law always applies at the smaller scales. So it's like super special pleading.
No, it's not. It's simply recognizing the boundary between what is witnessed and what is imagined. The law is empirical generalization and not ontological decree.
It's not generalization because it always happens. The laws of nature themselves.
And also, natural law is metaphor. Nature does not legislate.
And you can actually break this down even smaller, right? You can just say, like, okay, what comprises existence? Like material and energy. Certainly within like a naturalistic view, right? Matter, energy. Like all matter and energy is governed by the second law. Okay, so what is the universe made of other than matter and energy? So it would require the claim that all of a sudden matter and energy don't adhere to the second law. That's special pleading.
So you are by the belief that it's just energy and matter, or what was it?
I'm not of that belief, no. No. This is a critique of the naturalistic position. Like I specifically don't think all that. Yeah. I'm just showing a naturalist that even using their own framework, they end up like cornering themselves into having to invoke something outside of like naturalistic confinement.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. It boils down to invoking a force attributed to something, or well, attributed to a force not confined to the laws of nature, which is of course supernaturals.
Has there ever been the contemplation of that the current laws we have now developed out of I don't know, a universe that didn't follow them at first? Like maybe certain reactions happen.
Actually, I don't know what that means. No. I guess my answer would be, well, have I considered it? Sure. Yeah. In my consideration of like, is it possible that the laws of logic do not exist? And my answer to that is no. And so it doesn't really matter what universe it is, right? Like the laws of logic pre-exist it and exist independent of it.
Okay, so if I'm to steelman your position, simply you're saying that logic is pre-existing and absolute.
Yep.
You're saying that all communication and coherent speech require the law of logic or the laws.
I wouldn't say that actually. I'll pause right there. I wouldn't say that, right? I wouldn't say all communication because I obviously would yield to things such as an infant or animal conveying things to us or communicating things to us. Although I think that like maybe in both instances they are using logic. Like the child is using logic to figure out that it's hungry, and that one's maybe more of a reach. You could maybe argue it's not. Like the animal's like, if I bark, I get the human's attention to give me food. It's using logic, but I will yield that like not all forms of communication necessitate that, because you can just kind of cry out loud or whatever as a baby. But like specifically like the use of language to articulate coherent ideas amongst each other. You know, like
Okay,
to talk.
great. Yeah, it's noted that you conceded to that. But to continue then, you also said that to deny logic is to concede it, since even speaking coherently presupposes it.
Yep.
Would that not now be a paradox upon what you now said about not necessarily all communication requires it?
To articulate denial.
Okay, yeah, that's more formal. So, and further, you said physics, especially the second law, shows order and equilibrium, which in turn implies law, which in turn implies a lawgiver, that of an intelligent agent, for example, God.
Yep.
And then lastly, you said that logic and natural law are therefore prescripted to reality and not just man-made frameworks.
Sure. Yeah. Like, I mean, you know, depends on how you use the word prescriptive. Like I could be misremembering this. I just always remembered that to mean ought to be. Like the way I remembered descriptive versus prescriptive was descriptive is describing what is, prescriptive is what ought to be, or like a rule. But in the context of what he asked me, which is like, yeah, like a rule that's kind of existing before the universe that governed how it came to be, then I said, yeah, I would call it prescriptive. It's prescriptive versus that. In that, if I assume that dilemma, yeah.
Well, it has to be prescriptive though to jump into the leap of the agent that requires to prescribe it, right?
Sure.
But if we had, but real quick, if we had infinite universes that all have different fundamental properties and rules, and only thinking agents occur in the universes that have, you know, a universe that's decipherable.
I would say even in all those universes, things can't simultaneously be contradictory.
Well, we don't know. I mean, you don't know that though. You have no way
So
of
do you not
knowing
see
that.
that?
You have no way of
Well,
knowing. You have no way of knowing what's possible in other universes.
You have no way of knowing of even a way to articulate the alleged possibility you're invoking, right? Like you couldn't even articulate what it is you're claiming is possible right now. I'll give you an example. You can't. So you're like appealing to possibility on steroids. And you know, I don't live in that world. Like I don't do that. I do think it's funny that the creationist is oftentimes mocked as the one having unfounded beliefs that they can't observe empirically, yet the atheist will then be allowed to say things such as, well, isn't it technically possible that there's an alternative universe or millions of universes where the laws of logic don't exist and there's fundamental different rules and everything that I can't even explain exactly what it is exists there? Well, wait, who is it that has the faith again? Like the unfounded faith, the unjustified faith? Like the atheistic position requires so much more blind faith in a field of possibility that it's not even a comparison.
Yeah,
But,
that's why I don't do that myself.
Yeah.
But you know, the summary I gave to your stance, would you say that that is a fair account of your position?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. So, with that being confirmed, could I comment on it?
Yeah.
What? Okay, great. So, because I'm about to go, so I kind of want to just.
Say your final thing, brother.
Yeah. So, and hopefully, you know, don't think ill of me. I'm just.
No hard feelings, bro. It's just a convo.
Great. So, logic is not being. It is not pre-existing. It is not prescriptive to reality. Logic is man's grammar of thought. It is a scaffolding to order speech after presence is already given. Infants, animals, cries, gestures, and acts all communicate without laws of logic. Coherence arises from shared presence and not from abstract statutes. The second law of thermodynamics is not a cosmic commandment. It is a statistical description of local processes. To extend it to all existence is extrapolation, and to turn it into proof of a lawgiver is myth-making. So, Witsit launders presence into abstraction, then sells the abstraction back as proof of itself. But reality stands without logic and without law and without the lawgiver. So my verdict is 1. Logic is man-made grammar, not cosmic law. 2. Communication is presence shared and not concession to abstraction. 3. Equilibrium is outcome and not obedience. 4. The second law is description, not decree. 5. God is lawgiver, or God as lawgiver is myth stacked on metaphor. And 6. Presence precedes all, whole and broken, without law. Thus, my maxim is this: logic does not precede being, being precedes logic.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm definitely not gonna like.
If it's
let the
not
whole thing.
logical,
I don't, by the way, and I don't even know
if
that
it's
I
not
did
logical, how can it
the last
exist?
thing. Well, just to say
I
this,
did
right?
not
I'm
hear
just
too many.
yeah,
Sorry, I did not hear too many spoke at the same time.
yeah. Just say it's like I'm not entirely sure I disagree with the final statement, but like let's put a pause on it, right? Maybe I can go listen back to it and write the points down or something. Or if you want to send them to me in DM and then we can continue it or something.
Yeah, that I can do for sure.
But how can something exist if it's not logical? Because that would be a contradiction. Don't you need logic? Or is that just my human brain trying to understand the infinite?
First, there needs to be existence before there can be anything close to logic.
Yeah, but I almost consider logic not like a thing of itself. It's almost like, like a framework.
We just debunked that, bro.
Like it's the structure. It's the structure that allows reality to exist.
Is it man-made?
I don't think. No, sir. Logic is made. Well, logic is probably made by God. I'm not really sure, but it's not man-made.
Gotcha. Yes, I guess. By the way, I just want to just to drive home the conclusion to the other argument, or maybe any naturalists that are in here hear this. You take the second law, and so the first law, if you just ask the question, right? Because like I say, if you're an atheist, and more properly denoted, you would be an agnostic atheist. Atheism doesn't exist, and the reason atheism doesn't exist is because it's actually a declaration that there is no God. And I would venture to say that no one alive could honestly answer the question, are you 100% sure that there is no way that a God exists? No one could honestly say, yes, I'm 100% sure, right? So really you're atheist agnostic. And maybe to still man, what most would say is, I'm currently unconvinced, right? Like I'm saying I don't know, but I'm not convinced. I don't see the need for a God. I'm not convinced there is one, nor do I see evidence for one, etc. And they would think they're atheists, but they're really agnostic. And then they normally approach the conversation as though that means they have no burden of proof because they're just saying, I don't know. I'm not making a claim. I'm just saying, I'm not convinced. This is incorrect. It is a claim because intrinsic upon the agnostic position is the claim that it is possible that existence exists without a creator, right? To even say, I don't know, or that it's possible a God doesn't exist requires the possibility that a God doesn't exist. That is a claim that this universe could exist without a God. Anyway, so you take the atheist agnostic position, that's typically going to then be a naturalist position or a different variation of that, which is basically like, well, yeah, what exists is the natural world. Like nothing exists outside of the natural world. The supernatural doesn't exist. It's the material world. Everything comes from matter or energy basically comes from matter or is matter, derived of matter, and is within the natural world, right? Naturalism. And the governing principles of naturalism are natural laws. And two of the most famous of those, of course, that a naturalist would have to adhere to if they're saying that everything exists within the natural world would be the first and second law of thermodynamics. So now if we're going to ask the atheist, agnostic, naturalist, so how did all the matter and energy get here? All the matter and energy in the universe. God rocking, brother, you are hot micing. All right, I sent it. So if you ask, how did all the matter and energy get here? You have a couple possible answers. One could be, well, it was put here, right? It was placed here, it was created. Or option B is it was always here. So if you look at the first law of thermodynamics, it says matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. So as a naturalist, we have to adhere to that natural law. So the option that it was created isn't a possibility. It says it can't be created. So we have to say it was always here. And then we go to the second law. So you could say, like the guy said earlier, the Big Bang. Well, you could say all the matter and energy already existed and we just add a point of singularity prior to the Big Bang, whatever. You go to the second law, and we discussed that, which entropy increases, the amount of usable energy decreases. So if the amount of usable energy is decreasing, then it's decreasing from a beginning point. It has to have a point in which to decrease from, right? It cannot infinitely decrease from nothing. So it needs a beginning. So now we go back
can I explore that with you a little bit?
Yeah.
So if you're saying God created these laws, but the law itself states it can't be created, how do you reconcile that part? That he's just outside of it?
Yeah. Like the law just applies to the natural confinement. But of course, supernatural is beyond nature. Right. So the laws govern nature. Yeah. So if we go to back to the first question, when we said, oh, it's just always been here, we can no longer say that because it had a beginning. Like we now know it has a beginning using just natural law. So now we're left with one choice, which is that it was created, right? And for one, we've had to violate the first law of thermodynamics, which is natural law. So we need something that's not confined to natural law. So like we just covered, that's supernatural by definition, right? Attributed to a force not confined to the laws of nature. Like the etymology of supernatural is beyond nature.
Would you say God can interfere here to break those laws?
Yeah, of course, he's beyond the laws of nature. He can do whatever he wants.
So would the following statement still follow that the laws always happen?
In the natural, oh, cool. Okay. If the creator presented himself to us in the natural world and broke them, then no. But that is the only exception. Supernatural
so it's confined
intervention.
to our limitation.
The natural world's limitation, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have to, invoke something supernatural by definition. And this is like a real ugly word, typically for a naturalist, right? But it is what it is. Like natural law dictates it. So, and by the way, also naturalism is impossible on its face because it's a philosophy, which fundamentally requires an ontological premise existing outside of nature. Right? So, like the philosophical nature of naturalism refutes naturalism. But anyway, so if we go,
No, it's not true.
if we go back to the first law, it's just a fact. So if we go back to the first law, though, or the first question, and we have to invoke something outside of nature. So that's supernatural, right? Attributed to a force not confined to the laws of nature. It's etymology beyond nature. So we need something supernatural. So what we have to have is something that is external to the universe, thus not limited to the confinement of the universe or the natural world, right? Like time or space. I would say we actually impose those concepts on there in an attempt to communicate. But anyway, so it's eternal. So now we have something supernatural that's eternal and external to the universe that was here before the universe, right? Obviously being eternal. And it created all matter and energy. So we have an eternal supernatural creator that created all matter and energy that existed, or everything in existence. And then of course, so right there, you just described God. And beyond that, the reason I like this argument so much, and I'll land the plane here, is because I didn't write the first law, but it literally uses the word create. It says it can't be created. And so now we've had to violate that law to explain existence itself. And so the question is, what is the antecedent to creation? And it's obviously a creator, right? So we have a supernatural, eternal creator that created everything in existence. That is the necessary implication of naturalism, ironically.
I think I'd correct one thing there. You said external, where it isn't the universe that it needs to be external to. It's the laws that it needs to be external to. So you could have an object in reality, like an anti-entropic machine that puts puts the used energy back into a usable state without using up any energy itself, which could exist inside of the universe. So I get that something has to be outside of those, the thermodynamics rules, but it doesn't have to be external to, what we call Earth.
Well, it's supernatural, right? I mean, that's supernatural. Like you can't provide a natural mechanism for what you just said. The amount of usable energy gets turned into usable energy without using energy.
Yeah, it'd be outside of our current understanding. I'm just saying it has to be outside of the universe, I think is a step too far. It just has to be outside of the rules that we think everything here follows. There'd have to be an exception of something here that doesn't follow those rules.
Sure, just to clear, I think this is important to clarify this. So, sure, that argument is a critique of naturalism. It's a refutation of naturalism, and you're obviously not adhering to naturalism if you're invoking something that violates natural law. So, then it wouldn't apply to your conception, I suppose. Although I would still say, right, the reason I say external within that critique of naturalism is, of course, prior to the creation of said matter and energy, it wasn't there, which means it would be external. It would be a priori, right? It would be external to what we now call the universe. It wouldn't be confined to it because it created it.
Well, that again is like a step too far, because the thing that is internal, the thing that I suggested, right, allows for existence to be the thing that always has been and always will be. You basically just have a self-sustaining reality that never needed to be made. It's just always been, and sure, it appears to be running out of energy, but then every 10 trillion years, the machine kicks on and puts things back in order. How? That's a different question.
The
But
machine
an eternal universe with a machine
on.
like that,
It would have to create
does
energy, though, right?
what it needs to do.
It would have to create energy, right?
Yeah, it would have to be reverse entropic or whatever. Sure.
So it would so a machine would turn on and create the energy.
Well, it would maybe take. Well, it isn't about creating energy. It's about putting it. Basically rewinding the clock spring, right? Like old school watches or whatever had a spring that needed to be wound, right? It'd be a machine that rewinds the spring.
So basically, you're saying once the
Put things-
energy is used, you could for a crude description, but you could press a button that would basically reverse the clock, and the energy would no longer have been used.
I mean, you can think of all chemical reactions, right? Usable energy as springs that are wound up in the beginning that over time have their reactions and kind of unwind. And you would need a machine that somehow winds them back up again so that they can repeat the process. But of course, that's pure, that's pure fiction, or we've never discovered anything like that. But who knows? Maybe it's lurking in the corner somewhere.
Or we can't even really make sense of it, right?
Excuse me there.
But
Witsit, if you can hear me, man. You bring up this naturalism and naturalists. This is a new term for me, but it seems like from what you're wording, it's atomistic, particulist, secular. Is that what I'm getting?
those would typically all fall within it. Yeah, I mean, I guess you'd have to let the person tell you themselves for each of those parts, but
Okay.
yeah, many words for it, right? Like typically you could use secularist, materialist, reductionist, naturalist. There are different forms of naturalism as well.
Well, there's humanist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many isms and ists. It just was a little confusing to me at first because talking about nature itself, right? And then using this term naturalism, which has nothing to do with nature. And it was just throwing me off. So I was just wanting to get that correct in my mind. What the hell we're talking about? What nature?
You can Google the definitions.
So yeah, okay. Evidently, it's just something I wasn't aware of, but I'm learning, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I mean, most people will just I mean, people in this room maybe would know that, right? But like my experience, in the real world, if you have a conversation like this, most people don't really identify as a naturalist or whatever. They just say, I mean, I don't know if there's a God, man. I mean, I don't see why there has to be one. I'm not convinced there is one, or I don't think there is one. And yeah, I don't believe in any of that supernatural stuff, right? I just think that what's here is what is, and nothing exists outside of here. And that is kind of naturalism.
I have a close friend of mine, and I would say he's on the Pascal's wager point of view.
Meaning, why not believe in God? Worst case, nothing happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Evaluation.
Yeah, actually, there's a pretty profound component of that, actually. But I've just talked for a long time, so other people jump in.
The term naturalism on its face is not helpful. It's ambiguous. That's why every time the term is invoked, even among people who seem more or less articulate, intellectual about these things, you have to stipulate the definition of it to move forward, or else you're just going to equivocate the word. It's not a helpful term.
Yeah, which is why I did that. I defined it a few times. And the typical use of it, I mean, some people call it ontological naturalism or metaphysical naturalism, which is like only natural entities or forces exist. Existence is strictly and entirely physical or material and governed by natural law. That's the popularly held view.
Yeah, naturalists cannot even call themselves a naturalist because that is a label, and only the physical, natural world exists. So everything, including mind, reason, logic, morality, has to be reducible to physical processes like matter, energy. So you can't ground anything in anything else because there is no thing.
Yeah, that seems to be
houses that notion.
The largest problems in people claiming knowledge when it comes to neurologists and psychologists and all whatever, trying to allocate physically what we call consciousness, and so far have failed utterly that they can tell you where it's not located.
Everyone who espouses that notion, like Austin just mentioned, they just prove they don't understand. They don't understand what quote unquote nature is. Nature the most simple sense, the primary sense of the word, is a set of properties that constitute a given entity. Right? Everything has a nature. To say something doesn't have a nature entails necessarily that it doesn't exist in any sense. So,
Gregor, you're a little bit muffled. Not like super muffled, but a little bit.
I don't know what it is with me sometimes being muffled. I got my headphones, got new headphones, got a new phone, connected to the internet. I don't get it.
It actually sounds better right now. That's a natural process though. So.
Yeah,
make sure you practice good headphone hygiene as well. You want to clean your headphones. Make sure all your ports and microphones are covered with earwax and disgusting bits from your body as well.
This is true. So what I was saying was before the background noise. What was I saying? The term.
Basically, yeah, the term of natural being not even understood.
Yeah, nature, right? The God has a nature. So you say only natural things exist, and everything has a nature, then it doesn't necessarily includes the God is real. But they don't want to espouse that. But they don't realize that their sloppy rhetoric is allowing a conclusion that they don't welcome. And then people wonder why we have to be analytical. And they want to complain when I'm being rigorous about them defining the terms and speaking consistently with them. They want to derogate that as plain semantics. Semantics is the study of meaning. Do you want to say meaningless things in a debate?
I would hope not.
I would rather not speak any meaningless anything.
So I mean, this is how rudimentary the errors get when doing philosophy, when analyzing worldviews. Like some people's errors are so rudimentary that they just have analytical errors, they have ambiguities, they have equivocations, they have vague notions.
Possibly like to the point where it's something they believe as opposed to what is real.
Yeah, people can be credulous, right? Not having sufficient reason, not having any logically sound reason to believe what they espouse.
Yeah, there was an old lady that told me the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I asked her to
Yeah.
break that down for me. And she said there's so many people out there that think they're doing the right thing, but they're not. But they can't recognize it.
It's true. And sincerely wrong. Sincerely and fatally wrong. And of course, it irritates many people, but rather than disciplining their minds and their mouths or participating in the discussion, they just complain and throw a tantrum.
I've noticed a lot of people, they're waiting for their turn to speak and be heard, but what is it that they're speaking? Is it meaningless? That's an individual perspective. Like things I'm interested in, sometimes you guys will get on a roll with it to the point where I'm just fine just listening. I don't feel any need to put any input in. But for my help in recognizing the conversation, the naturalist, that was something I was not familiar with. Like you said, I could have Googled it, man, but I appreciate it right now because I'm holding my wife's hair. She's having a migraine. And anyway, thank you.
You
this is very
mentioned the
interesting.
mind. Okay.
No, you gotta.
I was gonna say you mentioned the mind. I'm not sure who was talking. LearnShare. You mentioned the mind before. The naturalist thinks the mind is just neurons firing, matter in motion. Thoughts and beliefs are products of physical, physical processes, not like rational deliberation. So the naturalist says that all of this is a product of random genital smashing over billions of years. They don't have any type of metaphysical foundation for any claim. They just say it is. They're dogmatic.
Well, when you hit secular, that's all as far as I need to go. That tells me all I need to know right there. Secular.
Well, yeah, that describes it.
Yeah.
Well, even then, the word secular is yet another vague term where you have to stipulate a definition in order for it to be helpful in the discussion. Because it's just borrowing the Latin word
Removal of
from
all spiritual potential and soul and prayer, etc.
what's happening. What's happening? What I was saying was a secular. The word itself, right? It's ambiguous on its face, and you have to stipulate a definition in order for it to be helpful in the discussion. Because it's just an anglicization of the Latin word meaning the world, right? Secular from seclorum, like novus ordo seclorum, like we see on our dollar bill, it just means the world. Right? Well, the world, like it's talked about in Romans 1, is the entire set of ubiquitous self-revelation of the God. But that's not a conclusion they want to welcome, right? So secularism, it's not a meaningful word until you stipulate a definition, which what you're really saying is just anti-theism.
Correct. Yeah, and like actually, basically almost everything that is typically said in these discussions by like whatever label you want to give it, like a quote unquote agnostic person, is that it's just different expressions of that. It's like, yeah, it's just always so baffling to me, right? Like the desperate nature, like to the point where it goes from this kind of pretentious, ostensible, rigid standard of evidence, et cetera, and reason to
Mhm.
anything goes. Like literally anything goes. Like if it can just come out of your mouth, it's good,
Without
right? Like
without
Any notion goes.
justification. All without justification. Yeah.
as long as you can just say the words, like, well, what if there's an infinite amount of universes with an infinite amount of beings that they can do things that don't fundamentally make any sense here or in any way that we could possibly understand, and they're able to violate every single known law of logic or law of nature that we can adhere to or acknowledge or observe. And then in that scenario, they were able to. It's like, what, dude? What happened to like we only believe in nature because that's all we see? Like, what happened to that? Like, oh, that's crazy.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
There's all types of angles people take to try to prove, with logic, by the way, that the laws of logic aren't universal. Like they take all types of like, I don't know, they hop in all types of Bugs Bunny rabbit holes to try to avoid the laws of logic and their properties.
How about that for a subject, right? Right there, what Galley mentioned. Think about this. If you say the laws of logic don't apply to A, right, to alpha, right, then the proposition couldn't be true about alpha, because none of the laws of logic apply to make anything intelligible, let alone true, let alone knowable. So it's a self-defeating notion. You have to presuppose the laws of logic in order to deny them.
exactly. That's what I was trying to say earlier. And oddly enough, the room was coming at me for like 30 minutes, it seemed like, but that seems pretty undeniable. I mean, and I may have pushed it a little far to make the point too, where I'm like, actually, to even articulate like coherent statements in an attempt to deny logic requires the concession of logic. Like I try, like
No, that's
really,
not
but
far at all.
yeah,
That's
Closet
not
used to
far at
say
all.
you can misuse the laws of logic, but you cannot not use the laws of logic.
Yeah, you can commit errors, but you cannot refrain from thinking in any pattern of thought, right?
right. Or like
Because
to
you
even
have
like
logically sound reasons. Not to cut you off, my bad. Because
you're,
people conflate, people often equivocate logic. Right? The word logic is polysemous, has multiple senses, all valid. You have logic itself, which is pattern of reason, just a pattern of thinking. Then you have the laws of logic, right? The laws of reliable, sound reasoning. Then you have the articulation of the laws, right? And then you have inscriptions of the laws, perhaps. And then you have recitations of the laws, right? These are all different things. But the laws themselves, the nature of reasoning, you have to identify. You have to affirm or negate, right? And whatever you affirm, whatever you predicate, it is not cannot simultaneously be anything that's contrary to that, right? And there are
exactly,
true
which is a law of
dichotomies,
logic.
right? There are true dichotomies that don't have a third option, right? The law of excluded middle.
Exactly. I was trying to, and like I might could. So I just threw this out here today, talking to Galley and them, and like this probably could be polished up, right? But what I was talking about is that, say you were attempting to deny the laws of logic, as soon as you go to actually articulate any type of opposition, you're going to have to use, in most cases, all three of the first principles of logic to do that, right? And
Yep.
and that's wild to think about. Like, to even articulate a coherent statement, you're doing it. And bro, I don't know why. I mean, I'll say kind of. I'm trying to remember exactly kind of how I said it, which is like says like every sentence follows a structure of identity. Like me, like the words have meaning, and uh, then adhere to non-contradiction, right? Because the word cannot simultaneously mean the opposite thing, and the excluded middle, because either the sentence is coherent or it's not coherent. And so, like to even present a quote unquote coherent opposition to the laws of logic require like all three of the first
Mhm.
principles.
And it doesn't even have to be coherent, because you could say an incoherent proposition that is intelligible.
I
That's
think
true.
God could do it.
That's a good
If
crazy.
anybody could do it, God would be able to do it.
God operates within the laws of logic.
I mean, the
It's not
scripture
logically
says
possible.
he operates above knowledge, at least human knowledge. Like he says, your ways are not my ways. If we had his ways, using divine logic, we could create a world like this ourselves. But
That
our
doesn't
ways
that
aren't
doesn't
his ways.
apply. That doesn't apply to that which is impossible in every mode. Like
But
you
we
can't
know
just
the
throw out
classical
your like.
laws of logic. We've had them for thousands of years. We should, if there was nothing that's operating outside of that, we could just create a world like he did.
That's not an entailment. That doesn't follow.
Alright.
If logic was given to us by God, how would it not be divine logic?
I mean, it was just given to us. This is like how I feel about it. It was given to us as a tool to understand this reality that we're in right now. We're
I
told
mean,
the knowledge of this
Well,
world will
your
pass
your
away.
knowledge of something does not matter. Logic exists regardless of your knowledge of it or not.
that's just an ambiguous notion where you're trying to put logic into this circle, and then you have this other circle over here where God is outside of the circle where logic is. It's just rhetoric. It doesn't make any sense. We just proved deductively how nothing can be exempt from the laws of logic. It's not logically possible. It's not possible in any mode. That which is supposedly not
Disagree.
no, that which is not related to logic. Right? You just try to disconnect the line, as it were, between logic and whatever you're trying to disconnect logic from. It's reduced to utter unintelligibility. It's not intelligible. It's not even conceivable. It does not make any sense.
All right, so well, we know we don't have the same ways as him. What other ways? Like what's missing there?
So see that this is your
If we had the
problem, your
classical laws
worldview.
of logic and they apply everywhere, even for God,